Chapter 469. Black Panther understood Luo Ting's personality and knew that he would not be able to change his mind once he had made up his mind. "Young master, I will arrange it." Luo Ting nodded with satisfaction, and a trace of a sinister smile flashed across the corner of his mouth. "After I have participated, you must do something else for me. Please instruct me, young master. Use your network to mobilize a group of elite warriors and make a trip to the human countries. I heard that Qin Wushuang has a family and a sect in the human countries. Especially his sect, they have openly become enemies with the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Due to the 10,000-year agreement between the 5 major forbidden spiritual zones, the heavenly Luo Daoist sect cannot send elite warriors to participate. However, this time, the elite warriors I need you to mobilize must not be related to the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. It must not even be related to you or me, understand?" Black Panther's expression was slightly surprised. "Young master, this... Tell me, do you understand?" Luo Ting asked coldly, and his tone had clearly become more serious. Black Panther was surprised as he immediately said, "I understand. Since you understand, you should know how to do it, right?" Black Panther thought for a moment and did not know how to answer. He said with fear, "Please instruct me, young master." "No, I have nothing to instruct you. I need you to use your own brain. If you're loyal to me, you must complete this matter on your own. Regardless of success or failure, it will have nothing to do with me. After you succeed, you will only make some mole crickets and crickets disappear. It will not be much of a contribution. If you fail, it will also have nothing to do with me. You must eliminate all troubles before you reach this level of relationship. This fire must not be allowed to burn my body." This time, Black Panther had completely understood. His young master wanted to stay out of this matter and clear his name. This was a test of his loyalty to Black Panther. "Young master, how about I send a few of my trusted men of sacrifice to do it? Most likely, those crickets and crickets in the human countries do not even have elite warriors at the Void Marshal stage. I only need to send 3 or 5 men of sacrifice at the refined Void Marshal stage. It will be enough to flatten that Stargaze Palace. What do you think?" Luo Ting said lightly. "In the end, your personal men of sacrifice are still people of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Once the matter is exposed, it will involve the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Exterminating an entire clan is a matter that would incur the wrath of both humans and gods, so we have to kick all the trouble to others. This method won't work. Then your subordinate will go and do a bounty mission to pursue and kill Qin Wushuang that was within the Xian Yuan Mound. It was reasonable for him to not be afraid of others knowing about the bounty mission. However, if they were to go to the human countries and slaughter them, how would they be able to place a bounty on such a mission? Do you think those people from the Rogue Cultivator Alliance are easy to deal with? Even if you put up an anonymous bounty, they have 100 ways to find out your identity. This method is also not advisable." Having 2 ideas rejected at once, the Black Panther was somewhat depressed. After thinking for a while, he suddenly had an idea. "Young master, this matter must be handled by those rogue cultivators. Only then can we completely clear our relationship with them. There's only one way to mobilize these rogue cultivators and get rid of the Rogue Cultivator Guild. I'll personally get in touch with some rogue cultivators and bypass the Rogue Cultivator Guild to do the illegal trade." When he said here, Black Panther felt that this method was perfect as he added, "Young master, you know that the freelance martial artists in the Xianyuan Mound are as numerous as ants. Most of them are poor. For money, for development, they will definitely do these things. If we can use money to solve these problems, it's not a bad method. However, Black Panther, have you ever thought that while we are putting up a bounty to kill Qin Wushuang, at the same time, people are attacking Qin Wushuang's sect and family? Regardless, the heavenly Luo Daoist sect is the first suspect. This method is still not perfect." Initially, Black Panther thought that this method was already good enough. Unexpectedly, he still got snubbed. "Young master, then in your opinion, what is the most perfect method?" "The most perfect method? Of course, it's killing with a borrowed knife." After Luo Ting had finished speaking these words, The eerie smile on the corner of his mouth became even more obvious. Killing with a borrowed knife? Whose knife? Inwardly, Black Panther was filled with questions. Apparently, he could not understand how to implement this strategy. Whoever is greedy, we will borrow their knife. Black Panther, in this world, how many motives are there to kill people? How many can you list? Luo Ting asked slowly. Black Panther thought for a moment and answered, the motive to kill people is only for benefits, or because of hatred, or because of beauty. Yes, you are right. It's not hatred nor beauty. We are talking about benefits. You know, deep in the bones of human beings, they're all greedy. You're not unfamiliar with the words of being blinded by benefits, right? We will use such benefits to drive those knives that have yet to reveal their true colors. Young master, I would like to hear the details. Hearing Luo Ting speak with such seriousness, Black Panther could not help but become interested. Think about how much benefits there are in the human countries that would make the elite warriors of the Xian Yuan mound kill people at all costs. Didn't you say it a moment ago? Most of the freelance martial artists are poor people. The more poor they are, the more they would have the evil nature of a desperado in their bones. Once there are enough benefits, it would be enough for them to ignore all consequences. The human countries do not have enough benefits for them to run around. However, your mouth is on your face. Could it be that you can't make up some beautiful rumors? As soon as Luo Ting spoke these words, Black Panther was instantly enlightened. Instantly, all of his confusion had become clear. That's right, he would make up rumors. Sometimes, rumors would drive people crazier than the truth. Once Black Panther had understood his thoughts, he also laughed and bowed to say, Young master, rest assured, I already know what to do for this matter. Borrowing a knife to kill people. That's right, it's borrowing a knife to kill people. Ha ha, young master. For sure I will make up a beautiful rumor and let those greedy butcher knives rush to the human countries. Remember, do it cleanly. The first principle of this matter is to not let trouble entangle the heavenly Luo Taoist sect. This is the bottom line. Black Panther patted his chest. Young master, if spreading rumors can also bring trouble, then I would have lived my life in vain. Don't worry. For this matter, no one will know. It will be as if that rumor had grown out of thin air. Luo Ting was overjoyed. Good. Then I will wait at the Xian Yuan mound for the day when the wonderful news comes. Yes. Black Panther retreated respectfully. As Luo Ting watched Black Panther leave, the muscles on his face trembled slightly. Evil lights flashed in his eyes. Murong Su, you are running away from me, belittling me, humiliating me, and insulting me. I will use my actions to answer you. I will let the outside world know that you, Murong Su, are a disaster wherever you go. Those who have interacted with you, Murong Su, will not have a good ending. His crazy and vicious self-talk and his twisted and almost perverted expression made Luo Ting appear extremely terrifying and malevolent. At the Crest Mountain, Qin Wushuang trained every morning and night. He was rather carefree as he explored the area around the Crest Mountain. Although after a few days, Qin Wushuang had yet to shed his mortal body and enter the void martial stage, the changes brought by his daily training were apparent. He knew that the void martial stage was right before him. Perhaps it would arrive in the next moment. Perhaps it would take another 10 days or half a month to knock on the door. All of this was only a sign. He could not pinpoint the exact time. To put it precisely, this was not only a process of training, but also a breakthrough on the psychological level. He needed an opportunity and an epiphany, and Bao Bao and Lone took turns to guard him. At the same time, these two guys were also training hard with the pupil attachment technique. This pupil attachment technique was extraordinary. First, it had a high requirement for their pupils' training. Each day, they must use the depth of their pupils to focus on a certain target, and they must do it without blinking. This was to train the penetrating power of the pupils. This was only the first step. To truly master this pupil attachment technique, besides these basic skills, they must train the sensitivity of the pupils to light. In other words, they must use their eyes to challenge the dazzling sunlight, the bright moonlight, and the mirror-like lake water. In general, the more sensitive they were to light, it meant the higher their pupil dilation and sensitivity. For such training method, if they were not elite warriors at the void martial stage, most likely they would have become blind. After practicing for a few days, Bao Bao and Lone learned why the minimum requirement for this technique was the refined void martial stage. Without the strength of the void martial stage, it would be suicide to train this pupil attachment technique. Qin Wushuang did not have a fixed schedule for his daily homework. Currently, his dantian was filled to the brim. In other words, his hard conditions had met the requirement for a breakthrough. Currently, inside his dantian, the spiritual qi was abundant and rich. And now, this spiritual qi was like a silkworm spitting out silk. It kept spitting out silk and forming a cocoon. The void martial stage was a stage where one would return to one's natural state and transform into the void. In other words, once he entered the void martial stage, inside his body, there would no longer be bits and pieces of spiritual qi. These spiritual qi would form into a whole entity. This whole entity would directly merge with a martial artist's spiritual perception to form a whole entity. And this whole entity would be the primordial spirit. Of course, this primordial spirit was not the true supreme Tao stage. It was only an illusory primordial spirit inside his body. It was a miraculous, illusory body that could not live on its own after leaving the body. This illusory body could not be counted as a true independent life form. This was the most fundamental difference between the void martial stage and the divine martial stage. At the divine martial stage, the primordial spirit would merge with the soul to form the divine soul. Even if the body was destroyed, the divine soul could leave the body and live independently. Of course, the primordial spirit formed at the void martial stage was in fact the embryonic form of the divine soul. It was the starting point on the path to the supreme Tao stage. Only the primordial spirit could climb to the immortal divine soul stage step by step after going through thousands of tempering. Without this primordial spirit stage, of course, one would not be able to reach the supreme Tao stage. This was a gradual process. Currently, Qin Wushuang did not completely grasp these principles. He was also exploring one step at a time. Each step after entering the upper sky spiritual martial force was a height that Qin Wushuang had never reached in his previous life. The higher he advanced, it meant he was one step closer to the supreme Tao stage. P.S. Since I went out today, I'm missing one chapter. Tomorrow, there will be 4 chapters. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 470. Red, blue, green, purple. Oh, so cool. Suddenly, Bao Bao jumped up and kept shouting, "Great second, this is great. Third, what are you shouting for?" Lone jumped out from the bushes not far away. Haha, a moment ago, I could already separate the colors from the light source, and it's getting clearer. Second, this means that my pupils are extremely sensitive to the light source. Haha, it seems that among the 3 of us, I am the first one to master the pupil attachment technique. Bao Bao was still extremely excited as he danced with his hands and feet. Lone twitched his mouth. That's because Boss has not practiced it yet. If Boss had practiced with us, I believe he would have mastered it first. Bao Bao laughed mischievously. That might not be the case. Although Boss has superior talent, he does not have the bloodline of the ancient spiritual monkey. How do you know Boss does not have the bloodline of the ancient divine clan? The ancient divine clan does not only have the spiritual monkey. The immemorial era was the era of the divine devil. Divine devils were everywhere. Even if your ancestor is the spiritual monkey, it's not necessarily superior to those of the ancient divine devil bloodline. Lone Tianxing was competitive. He knew that he was at a disadvantage in terms of bloodline. Certainly, he would not be as good as Bao Bao in terms of training. Of course, he was not jealous. On the contrary, he was used to getting along with Bao Bao. He was only unwilling to admit Bao Bao's strength verbally. Thus, at this moment, he could not help but pull Qin Wushuang out to speak. Bao Bao chuckled. Then let's count how long it took for me to master the pupil attachment technique and how long it took boss. When he said here, suddenly, Bao Bao looked towards the back of the mountain. By the way, how is boss? His breakthrough this time seems to be somewhat different. Since Lone was on guard duty a moment ago, Bao Bao had the time to practice the pupil attachment technique. This time, boss is breaking through a level. Of course, it's different. However, I see that he is relaxed during this time. There should not be much problem. Bao Bao nodded. Second, to speak the truth, boss's strength and potential are truly terrifying. When he was cultivating, I had observed him. I always felt that boss's body was like a huge treasure trove. There were many unimaginable treasures waiting to be opened. You said that boss has the blood of the gods in his body, but I really don't dare to say that he doesn't. With regard to Qin Wushuang's talent, loneliness could empathize with him. Wait, what is that? Suddenly, Bao Bao's pupils shrank as he looked at the horizon with astonishment. In the sky, it was as if a cloud was drifting over. Its speed was so fast that it looked more like a bolt of lightning. Quick, inform the boss. Lone grabbed the long sword that he had seized from General Manager Su. I will restrain the enemy, Bao Bao said with a gloomy expression. No need. Boss is already aware and is rushing over. As he spoke, the cloud in the air suddenly descended and landed directly on the hillside. Almost at the same time, Qin Wushuang also rushed before Lone and Bao Bao. He growled, "Step back." Qin Wushuang had learned his lesson from last time. He held the graceful spiritual Bao lightly with one hand and maintained a posture that he could attack at any moment. He shouted lightly, "Hold on there." Below the hillside, that cloud dispersed and a figure slowly appeared from within. This person had an extremely eye-catching purple beard. When Qin Wushuang and the others saw him, they were all astonished. This person was Mu Rong Qianji. Mu Rong Qianji seemed to have disregarded Qin Wushuang's attack formation as he kept walking up the slope. Although his steps appeared light, when he walked, they appeared extremely graceful. Each step appeared to be a small step to the naked eye. However, in fact, the distance was more than a dozen meters. Bao Bao revealed an unsightly expression as he stuttered. This is the ability to shrink the ground into inches. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was moved. He had also heard about the divine ability to shrink the ground into inches. Now, after witnessing it with his own eyes, he finally understood when Bao Bao had it pointed out. Indeed, as Bao Bao had said, the distance from the bottom of the hill to where they were standing was more than 300 meters. However, this Mu Rong Qianji seemed to have only taken 3 or 4 steps, and he was already close to 300 meters away. Young man, I didn't expect that we would meet here. Mu Rong Qianji's voice did not contain any anger or happiness. His tone was calm, as if he was talking about something unrelated to them. Qin Wushuang's pupils also shrank rapidly. I repeat, stop your steps. Mu Rong Qianji laughed and stopped his footsteps abruptly. Indeed, he stood in the same place. He looked at Qin Wushuang with interest and turned to look at Bao Bao and Lone. Lone would have been fine, but when he stopped to look at Bao Bao, Mu Rong Qianji revealed a playful smile from the corner of his mouth. You little guy, you should be that little monkey from the Monkey King Mountain, right? Under Mu Rong Qianji's power, although Bao Bao was not afraid, he could not help but feel stupefied when his identity was exposed all of a sudden. He could not speak a word. And you, Mu Rong Qianji, turned back to look at Qin Wushuang. The young talent from the human countries, you saved your family, sect, and even your country with your power alone. I must say, at your age in the human countries, you are very impressive for doing all these things. These few words did not contain any hostility or threat. However, these few words were more powerful than any weapon. It had destroyed almost half of Qin Wushuang's hostility and defense line. Lone looked at Qin Wushuang, and suddenly he shouted, "That day, I saw you at the Freelance Martial Artist Union. Later on, I heard that you're a major figure in the Xianyuan Mound and the head of the Floating Snow House. Could it be that a major figure like you is going to go against our boss, a young and inexperienced person? Yes, Senior Mu, since you recognized us. We will not play hide and seek with you. Senior Mu, with your identity, it's somewhat unreasonable for you to make things difficult for us. However, Qin Wushuang did not say anything. Although his expression was calm, between his brows, there was a firm determination. There was not the slightest trace of cowering or fear. He only stood there and maintained the attacking posture with a graceful spiritual bow. Mu Rong Qinji laughed. Little monkey, why do you think that I have come here to make things difficult for you guys? Senior Mu Rong, don't play dumb. That day, at the Freelance Martial Artist Union, you placed a bounty of 100,000 for a clue to find us. It seems that someone has already claimed your 100,000 bounty. You have spent a lot of money. Bao Bao's tone did not show any weakness. Young man, if I were you, I would put away my bow and arrows. Mu Rong Qinji looked at Qin Wushuang with a smile and continued to speak slowly. Firstly, your bow and arrows are good. However, with your current strength, the success rate is less than 1% if you want to use a heaven-defying weapon to deal with me. Secondly, if I have hostile intentions, I have 100 ways to approach you guys without being detected. Lastly, all the hostility is only your one-sided imagination. Let's find a place and talk. As he spoke, Mu Rong Qinji's body seemed to have been smashed into countless pieces like a mirror. He had disappeared into thin air. This type of disappearance was not an illusion. Instead, it was a complete disappearance of both his soul and body. This was a completely different method compared to the void martial stage's concealment. Just when Qin Wushuang and his friends were dumbstruck, suddenly, Qin Wushuang felt someone lightly pat at his shoulder. He immediately turned his head, and there was another wave of emptiness. There was not a single figure. Regardless of how they urged their spiritual perception to search, they had no clue. Ha ha, I will wait for you on the hillside. Mu Rong Qinji's voice rolled in from all directions. It was as if a few hundred voices had rolled into their eardrums at the same time. Ever since Qin Wushuang had stepped onto the path of martial arts, he had never felt such frustration. He could only make a hand gesture to Bao Bao and Lone. Then, he jumped rapidly towards the hillside. On top of the hillside, Mu Rong Qinji sat on the ground with a leisurely expression. He had been waiting for a long time. Sit. Mu Rong Qinji pointed to the lawn across from him lightly. Regardless of how thick Qin Wushuang's face was, he could not shoot arrows at Mu Rong Qinji. Additionally, he was certain that Mu Rong Qinji's previous words were not exaggerated. With his strength, even with the assistance of the graceful spiritual bow, he could not harm Mu Rong Qinji. Ha ha, old man. Bao Bao was rather straightforward. We did not play hide and seek with you, yet you play hide and seek with us. Nice skill. Admirable, admirable. Mu Rong Qinji stroked his purple beard and laughed. Little monkey, earlier you boasted that you have the bloodline of the ancient spiritual monkey. No need to envy my little skills. If you grow up smoothly, perhaps in 10 or 20 years, it will be my turn to envy you. Bao Bao scratched his ears and scratched his cheeks as he said with a chuckle, Will I be as powerful as you in 10 or 20 years? If the bloodline of the divine clan is completely awakened, you will only be stronger than me. Mu Rong Qinji was rather open and amiable. He did not put on any airs before the younger generation. Ha ha, then I'm looking forward to it. Bao Bao was extremely excited. He rolled his eyes and asked again, Old man, your move a moment ago was truly cool. How did you do it? Little monkey, if you want to use these idle words to attract my attention, I advise you not to think of such little ideas. For my moves, you will understand when you break through the restraint of the void martial stage, shatter the void, merge the great Tao, and enter the exquisite mysterious boundary stage. To put it bluntly, shattering the void was these simple words. Once one had reached this stage, within a certain range, they could completely ignore the rules of space. They could shatter the void, open up another passage, and teleport instantly. Of course, the distance of such teleportation would depend on the strength of one's strength. It was not completely out of the control of the rules. In the end, the exquisite, mysterious boundary stage was not the supreme Tao stage. Even for the supreme Tao stage, it was impossible to completely ignore the rules of space. For your information, in the great Tao of the universe, there were only two strongest rules. They were the rules of space and time. The four directions were called space. Since ancient times, it was called time. The so-called space and time rules were the rules of space and time. Of course, even Mu Rong Qianji could not touch these profound rules. It was because even someone as powerful as Mu Rong Qianji could not touch the existence of these rules. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 471. However, Mu Rong Qianji's simple explanation had caused Qin Wushuang to fall into deep thought. He had completely forgotten his current situation. Shatter the void. Instantly, these four words lingered in Qin Wushuang's spiritual perception. From Qin Wushuang's understanding, the upper sky realm of the spiritual martial force was the initial step for a human to break away from the limit of the body's power. They would begin to grasp the power of nature and combine it with their own body. It was the initial contact between a martial artist and all living things in nature. Only after entering the void martial stage would one be considered to have reached the next level. One would truly merge with nature, refine one's appearance in the vacuum, and acquire great divine skills. The ultimate pursuit of the void martial stage was to break away from the restraint of the void and shatter it. Enter the exquisite, mysterious boundary stage. That exquisite, mysterious boundary stage was the marvelous stage after breaking through the void martial stage. It was the path one must pass to enter the supreme Tao stage. In fact, this path was the path to build the foundation for the supreme Tao stage. With a solid foundation, it would not be a problem to enter the supreme Tao stage. It would even determine one's development potential after entering the supreme Tao stage. However, the majority of martial artists would die on this path after entering the exquisite, mysterious boundary stage. It was because the path to the supreme Tao stage could be said to be overgrown with thorns. That supreme Tao stage was like a fresh flower among the thorns. It was destined to be picked by a few people. Mu Rong Qianji also looked at Qin Wushuang meaningfully. He did not interrupt his thoughts. Although Bao Bao's little scheme was exposed, he did not blush and his heart did not skip a beat. He still tried to find topics to talk about. Lone knew that he did not have the right to speak as he remained silent. Old man, it was truly satisfying to kill that iron holler. That guy could not keep his mouth shut. If he had not talked too much, I am afraid you would not have seen us today. Mu Rong Qianji said with a smile. Why would I kill Iron Holler? Killing him was only a good deed done by the personal guard of Xie Sankai, the prefecture lord of the Orderly Mountain Prefecture. Lone said with a neither cold nor warm tone. That was flattery, only I didn't expect to flatter the wrong place. Mu Rong Qianji smiled lightly. All right, little monkey, don't beat around the bush. Since I have found you guys, you should know my intentions. Recently, has my mischievous daughter contacted you guys? Recently, Bao Bao scratched his head. Old man, it should have been almost a year since Sister Mu Rong last appeared. However, she seemed to have mentioned that she did not plan to return to the Xianyuan Mound for the time being. Perhaps she was still touring the human countries right now. For your information, regardless of the human countries, the pressure of life is less than your Xianyuan Mound. I'm guessing that Sister Mu Rong just wants to relax. Relax. Mu Rong Qianji sighed softly. If it's just relaxing, I'm not worried about anything. I'm only worried that her relaxing doesn't make her mood better. Instead, it makes her mood even heavier. That won't happen. I see that big Sister Mu Rong is still very cheerful. She's talking and laughing with us. Old man, don't worry. In the human countries, even if big Sister Mu Rong walks sideways, no one can threaten her. Mu Rong Qianji bitterly shook his head. Little monkey, if it was only in the human countries, there really isn't anything to worry about. However, don't forget that the human countries are well developed. Besides entering the Xianyuan Mound, You can enter the heavenly fire southern border from the south, the endless eastern sea from the east, and the illusion heavenly lake from the west. For these places, which one of them is not as terrifying as the Xian Yuan Mound, as the forbidden spiritual zone? Old man, Sister Murong should know the severity of her actions, right? Murong Qianji did not answer. Instead, he stopped to look at Qin Wushuang. Lord Murong, your daughter is exceptionally intelligent. She is definitely not a willful and reckless person. This was Qin Wushuang's evaluation. Although it was short, it had hit the nail on the head. Although Qin Wushuang and Murong Su had only interacted a few times, they both had a good impression of each other. From Qin Wushuang's understanding of Miss Murong, she should be a girl that was soft on the outside but firm on the inside. Inwardly, she had her own opinions. Murong Qianji gave a long sigh. Escaping from the marriage and running away from home, if these are not willful and reckless actions, what could be more willful and reckless actions? Apparently, Murong Qianji did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, everyone could hear that from his tone, there was more doting than blaming. One could even say that from Murong Qianji's tone, there was some indulgence. Bao Bao spoke with conviction. Why did she run away from home? It's because the marriage is coming. Why did she escape from the marriage? For sure, it's because she did not like this marriage. Old man, for such matter, if it were anyone else, they would also escape. Honestly, Murong Qianji did not blame his daughter too much for her actions of escaping from the marriage. Although escaping from the marriage had caused the floating snow house to face a lot of pressure, the protest and pressure from the heavenly Luo Taoist sect had also made it difficult for him to conduct himself. However, compared to his daughter's lifetime happiness, he felt that these pressures were insignificant. Of course, being the head of the floating snow house, of course he could not deal with this matter as he wished. On the surface, he still had to do something. Thus, he had left the floating snow house and arrived at the border area of the Xian Yuan Mound. Rather than saying that he had come out to search for his daughter, he was worried that his daughter had encountered trouble outside. One could even say that he was only making a gesture to ease the pressure from the heavenly Luo Taoist sect. In fact, Murong Qianji had also received a lot of information. He also knew about the relationship between Murong Su and Qin Wushuang. Only, he did not know much about the details. It was because the appearance of a name Qin Wushuang had made Murong Qianji more or less worried. Since he loved his daughter dearly, he could not help but worry that his daughter was not experienced enough and had been deceived by people from the outside world. Thus, regardless of the cost, he collected information about Qin Wushuang and urgently wanted to meet with Qin Wushuang. This meeting with Qin Wushuang had dispelled a lot of his doubts and worries. At least, he saw a form of spirit and a form of responsibility from Qin Wushuang. Young man, there are a lot of rumors from the outside world. There's also a lot of pressure on your shoulders. Do you know why the heavenly Luo Taoist sect has issued a bounty to kill you? Qin Wushuang said lightly. If it's related to that young master Luo Ting of the heavenly Luo Taoist sect, I would not be surprised. Oh, Murong Qianji was stunned. In terms of strength, perhaps there is still a big gap between you and that Luo Ting. However, in terms of breadth of mind and shrewdness, I am afraid that Luo Ting is 10 streets ahead of you. Haha, old man. That young master Luo Ting is engaged to senior sister Murong. Could it be that because of the relationship between senior sister Murong and my boss, he would not vent his anger on my boss? Bao Bao asked with an exaggerated tone. With my observation and understanding of Luo Ting, if the bounty has been put aside for a long time without any progress, it's highly possible that he would make a move himself. Bao Bao did not care. Then let him do it himself. Ever since the heavenly Luo Taoist sect had issued the bounty, we are destined to not let them off. Murong Qianji reminded him with a smile. Also, let me remind you that Luo Ting is at the profound void martial stage. If he were to appear before you now, I am afraid it would not be easy to deal with him. Qin Wushuang stood up and said to Murong Qianji, Lord Murong, the heavenly Luo Taoist sect still holds some personal grudges with me. I am afraid it's not because of your daughter. Murong Qianji smiled lightly and fixed his gaze on Qin Wushuang with a profound gaze. After a while, he also stood up and flicked his sleeves lightly. Young man, the floating snow house has our own principles when doing things. In fact, my 100,000 bounty will always be there. In fact, it's a form of protection for you. However, this form of protection may not have much effect. Once the heavenly Luo Taoist sect has made up their mind, the consequences would be terrifying. Before you are prepared, it's best to not touch their edge. Unless the crisis of the heavenly Emperor Qin clan can be resolved. Mu Rong Qinji added. This was a piece of advice to Qin Wushuang. Honestly, Mu Rong Qinji admired Qin Wushuang. Due to the strong first impression, Mu Rong Qinji admired Qin Wushuang for all his achievements in the human countries. And through this short meeting with Qin Wushuang, he saw a different side of him compared to those exceptional disciples of the Xian Yuan Mount. From Qin Wushuang, he did not see the arrogance of a genius disciple. He also did not see any sense of superiority, complacency, or any bad habits. He was calm, determined, and would not panic in the face of chaos. It was apparent that Qin Wushuang's reputation as a genius and all his achievements did not come out of nowhere. Naturally, he had his reasons behind it. This was the first time they had met. Naturally, Mu Rong Qianji could not speak too much and would not express his standpoint. However, he was satisfied that the existence of such a young man would be a good restraint to the heavenly Luo Taoist sect. As long as the heavenly Luo Taoist sect had this restraint, the days of the floating snow house would become more relaxed. They would not have to face the heavenly Luo Taoist sect's urging for marriage every day. For sure, I will remember Lord Mu Rong's advice. Only the tree may desire peace, but the wind will not stop. I only hope that the heavenly Luo Taoist sect will not go too far and leave some leeway for everything. Or else, even if I know it's impossible, I will fight to the death. Qin Wushuang did not make an impassioned speech. He only expressed his standpoint clearly. Bao Bao also chimed in. That's right, it will not be easy for that heavenly Luo Taoist sect to kill us. Mu Rong Qianji waved his hand and laughed. Today's meeting will end here. Take care of yourselves. Since your whereabouts are no longer a secret, if I were you guys, I would either change my appearance completely or leave the Xian Yuan Mound. For now, it doesn't matter whether you guys go or not at the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. When he said here, Mu Rong Qianji shook his head and laughed. There was a trace of a strange smile on his face as he walked down the slope. After only a few steps, Mu Rong Qianji's figure had disappeared completely from the sky. Bao Bao gave a long sigh of relief and said, Thank the heavens, I thought we would not be able to escape today. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly. If Lord Mu Rong truly wanted to kill us, I am afraid we would not even have the chance to be afraid. Lone gave a helpless sigh. I must admit that this old man has a powerful aura. It seems that this old man is the legendary elite warrior at the exquisite mysterious boundary stage. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 472. Mu Rong Qianji's unexpected visit, especially his last reminder, had increased Qin Wushuang and the other's sense of crisis. Apparently, Mu Rong Qianji's last words were to remind them that someone had revealed their secret to him. That was why he had found them so easily and confirmed Qin Wushuang's identity. Boss, it seems that General Manager Su's companion has revealed our matter in the end. I am afraid that people of the primary central sect will find this place soon, right? Boss, should we retreat now? Qin Wushuang shook his head with determination. Retreat now? No, let's stay here and not go anywhere. Then let's change our attire. Bao Bao suggested. How about me and third revert to our true forms? It will save us the trouble of changing. With three of us, it's easy to attract other people's attention. The purple flame electric beast did not object. Do whatever you want. Overall, this crest mountain is extremely suitable for training. I have a feeling that I will achieve a substantial breakthrough at this crest mountain. Bao Bao and Lone nodded at the same time. Of course, they were not afraid of trouble. Hearing Qin Wushuang's words, their blood also surged. Okay, boss, we will stay here with you until you break through. However, I think we should go deeper. This crest mountain is extremely steep. We should go deeper. Perhaps there will be other fortuitous opportunities at this crest mountain, Lone said with a whimsical thought. Just as Bao Bao was about to refute him, unexpectedly, Qin Wushuang said with a smile, I have the same intention. Let's go deeper. Look, that mountain peak from afar seems to be wrapped by a layer of red clouds. I heard that it is the crater of the crest mountain. It's called the Wild Flame Cliff. Wild Flame Cliff. This name is truly eye-catching. However, it seems that mountain peak could spurt out fire at any moment. It is a giant furnace. Boss, we cannot go there, right? Yes, let's go there. Lone appeared extremely excited as he rubbed his fists and rushed over. Third, could it be that you do not have the guts to come with me? Provoked by Lone, of course Bao Bao would not admit defeat. Let's see who doesn't have the guts. Qin Wushuang saw that these two guys were so competitive that they could even bicker over such a trivial matter. He smiled bitterly and chased in that direction. There was a reason why there were no sects to settle down in this crest mountain. With the cultivation of Qin Wushuang and the others, the closer they got to the Wild Flame Cliff, the more difficult it became for them. Their skin could feel waves of heat rising, as if they were on fire. Oh my God, this temperature is like an oven. Bao Bao cried out. But GMO was very happy. The temperature is good. I like it. Lone was good at using fire, so he had a good sense of the fire element. This little bit of temperature was nothing to it. As the saying goes, looking at a mountain is close enough to kill a horse. It looked like the opposite mountain peak. Even though Qin Wushuang and the others were fast, it still took them a long time to walk. Along the way, strangely, Qin Wushuang did not speak a single word. He only walked with a focused expression. If his footsteps were not moving forward, his expression was like a sculpture that was in deep thought. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang's brows moved. His entire body felt a wave of blazing heat burning madly, especially at the dantian in his lower abdomen. It was as if a ball of fire was burning there. All the genuine qi inside his body also started to stir slowly. Like a tornado, it rotated at a high speed inside his dantian. This situation made Qin Wushuang realize something inwardly. Second, third, protect me. Qin Wushuang shouted in a low voice. He shook his long spear and started to perform spear techniques on the spot. Qin Wushuang had created 3 moves of the Hegemon breaking formation spear technique. To be precise, it was 2.5 moves. The first awakening move was the starting move. This spear move came from the heart. The exquisite part was the heart technique and the changes. Caught off guard, a sudden spear move was like a sudden clap of thunder. And the nucleus gathering move was the essence part. Qin Wushuang at this moment, when he performed it, the flames were naturally monstrous. At this moment, what he was most sensitive to was not the other elements. Naturally, it was the fire element. In the vicinity of the Wild Flame Cliff, there was no natural element more active than the fire element. Qin Wushuang's move was naturally based on the local conditions. When a spear was brought out, the flames were condensed, driving the spear light, dancing and roaring in the sky. The scene was like a fire dragon, wreaking havoc in the sky, burning the entire horizon red for half a day. Then, Qin Wushuang guided the spear, and the flames caused by the spear light suddenly rose again. The intensity of the fire also changed from its initial faint red color to a blazing red color. The flames soared into the sky, as if tens of thousands of fire crows had gathered together to drag down the sun. Wherever the spear light touched, a huge fireball was formed. Outside the fireball, there were provocative flames, swaying wildly in the air, as if they could burst out at any time to wreak havoc. This move was the evolution of the nucleus gathering move. The third move, deep nucleus move. This was a move that Qin Wushuang had created on the Monkey King Mountain. but he had not perfected it. At this moment, in a favorable environment, his mind was opened, and a flash of inspiration flashed through his mind, and he actually performed it in one go. Perfect. The creation of this move, which had evolved from the previous move's kingdom, could be described as perfect. Qin Wushuang's spear tip was pressed against the big red fireball, but he did not release it. As long as the spear light trembled at any moment, he would be able to completely activate this extremely hot, highly fused fire profound mysteries. Once this attack struck a target, this large fireball would immediately explode, creating a fatal blaze. The instant this deep nucleus move was formed, the genuine qi inside Qin Wushuang's dantian also slowly stopped its previous high-speed circulation. At this moment, Qin Wushuang only felt that inside his dantian, there was a ball of hot air. Like a little mouse, it was scuttling around inside his dantian. This ball of hot air was like an egg. It seemed to be nurturing a new life. Void Martial Stage. Instantly, these three words flashed across Qin Wushuang's mind. These three words made Qin Wushuang beam with joy. Finally, it was here. After waiting for so long and brewing for so long, the door to the refined Void Martial Stage had finally opened. Qin Wushuang knew that that ball of hot air belonged to his primordial spirit. Although this primordial spirit had not merged with his spiritual perception, clearly, this primordial spirit had already started to operate. It had started to familiarize itself with his body's condition and sought to merge with his spiritual perception. The Void Martial Stage was to refine one's body into the void and condense the primordial spirit. In fact, this primordial spirit was not an independent life form, but an illusory primordial spirit. It was just the embryonic form of a god. Only by entering the divine Tao stage would one truly possess life and achieve the power of the divine soul. At this moment, the primordial spirit was only an embryonic form. It was a seed that needed to be refined continuously to upgrade into the divine soul. Despite this fact, to Qin Wushuang, the Void Martial Stage was an unprecedented experience. It was a height that he could not even imagine in his previous life. Qin Wushuang was immersed in extreme joy and did not realize the drastic changes around him. It was a change where the grass and trees withered and the earth shook. "Boss, you succeeded?" Bao Bao was the first one to jump over. "Congratulations, boss. You are at the refined Void Martial Stage." "Ha. Now us three brothers are at the refined Void Martial Stage." Lone also laughed proudly. Bao Bao looked around at the terrain. The best part is that with this wild flame cliff as a training ground, those signs after boss breakthrough were all covered by the soaring flames of the wild flame cliff. "Boss, I cannot help but admire you. At that time, you already thought of this problem, right?" Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and nodded. "Yes, initially when you and Second broke through, there were great movements, and this crest mountain was the most suitable place for it. It allowed me to break through without any reaction from the outside world." Qin Wushuang put away the He-Gemin breaking formation spear and raised his head to look at that mountain peak. He saw that behind the peak of the mountain, there were still soaring flames. "The wild flame cliff is behind this mountain peak, right?" Qin Wushuang said with emotion. "Are you interested in going to take a look?" Of course. Lone could not ask for more. Since Bao Bao had been here for a while, he had gradually adapted to this deadly high temperature. All of them followed Qin Wushuang to climb up the mountain. This mountain peak was extremely steep. Fortunately, it was not lush and the path was not difficult to walk on. Because of the high temperature for a long time, ordinary plants could not survive. The plants that could survive here were all plants that could withstand the high temperature. These plants did not have many branches or leaves. Third, don't you think that Wild Flame Cliff is the best place for you to practice the pupil attachment technique? Where would you find a light source that shines 24 hours a day? Reminded by Qin Wushuang, Bao Bao also realized the truth as he said with joy, "That's right, boss. You are smart. Could it be you also want to practice this pupil attachment technique?" "For now, I don't have the time to practice this pupil attachment technique. You too can use this chance to practice." there were still many things waiting for Qin Wushuang to do. No matter how he looked at it, the pupil attachment technique would not be his priority. Since he had just entered the refined void martial stage, he needed to consolidate his new stage and familiarize himself with the different changes brought by the new stage, as well as the abilities he already possessed. Most importantly, he must consolidate his compatibility with the graceful spiritual bow. The defeat before Mu Rong Qianji had made Qin Wushuang fully realize that it was not enough to have a powerful weapon. He must refine this weapon to its strongest state. After entering the refined void martial stage, naturally Qin Wushuang's strength had increased tremendously. Naturally, he needed to put in more effort to combine it with a graceful spiritual bow. Currently, the He Jimin breaking formation spear was training his close combat power, and the graceful spiritual bow was a long-distance attack. It was the existence that determined the limit of Qin Wushuang's combat power. Thus, at this stage, the development of the power of the graceful spiritual bow was of utmost importance. Besides the graceful spiritual bow, Qin Wushuang also remembered that initially at the Monkey King Mountain, the Silver Monkey King had given him a gift, Purple Cloud Yin-Yang fruit. This miraculous fruit would allow him to refine the Purple Cloud Yin-Yang wings at the refined void martial stage. It would allow him to possess the ability to fly only at the transformation void martial stage. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 473. To the current Qin Wushuang. These two matters were on par with each other. Only by combining these two matters could he maximize his combat power in a short period of time. Although Mu Rong Qianji had reminded him to be careful of young Master Luo Ting's personal attack. However, Qin Wushuang also had his capital. He was also confident that as long as he could take care of these two matters, if everything went smoothly, even if it was that Luo Ting, he would have the confidence to deal with him. Before he had broken into the refined void martial stage, he already had the power to kill an elite warrior at the transformation void martial stage with a graceful spiritual bow. Now, after he had advanced to the refined void martial stage, his strength had increased by one level. If this level of improvement could be reflected in the combination of the graceful spiritual bow, naturally, the increase in destructive power would be astonishing. Naturally, Qin Wushuang had his considerations as he had chosen this crest mountain. The more dangerous the environment, the more torturous the environment, the more it could stimulate one's potential. Additionally, the stimulation from such high temperature to the body was astonishing. As the so-called saying went, there was no sun or moon in the mountain. Unknowingly, half a month had passed. In this past half month, regardless of Qin Wushuang, Bao Bao, or Lone, they had all made astonishing gains. One must say that in terms of training under the dangerous environment of the Crest Mountain, indeed, they had achieved twice the result with half the effort. Although Bao Bao had achieved some success with the pupil attachment technique, even Lone had gradually become enlightened and found the feeling. Under such environment, Lone did not put all his efforts into training the pupil attachment technique. Instead, he focused on increasing his own strength. Many of Lone's attack techniques were related to the fire attribute, especially his genuine fire attacks. They all relied on the manipulation of the fire attribute. Under such environment, of course, Lone would not let go of any opportunity to increase his combat power. He was preparing to explore a new attack technique. For this technique, he needed to work on the purity and congealing of the genuine fire. Once he had figured it out, naturally his attack power would increase several times. The Purple Flame Electric Beast was a spiritual beast from a few thousand years ago. In the Tianxian land, he belonged to an extremely precious spiritual beast clan. He could continuously evolve and had a powerful perception of the natural attribute. The stronger the perception, the higher the attack power. In actual combat, the higher the attack power, the higher the combat power. What's more, the Purple Flame Electric Beast's defense and resistance were also extremely abnormal. Naturally, Bao Bao practiced the pupil attachment technique wholeheartedly. After cultivating for so long, it was already able to release its eye technique. Although the range of the attack was not far enough, it could be said that he had grasped the trick. During this time, it had been using some leaves that looked almost the same as its demonstration. Among the tens of thousands of leaves, he chose one and made some markings on its back. Then, he mixed it into all the other leaves and messed them up. After the confusion, it used its eye technique to track down the leaf that had been used. It could easily find the leaf that had used the eye technique. It had to be said that this was an inspiring success. As for Qin Wushuang, his harvest during this period of time was also very gratifying, especially the fusion with the graceful spiritual Bao. Based on the original foundation, Qin Wushuang didn't spend too much effort and easily upgraded the graceful spiritual Bao to the level of proficiency that matched his realm. The power of the graceful spiritual Bao. Even if I were to reach the refined Void Martial stage, I would at most be able to unleash 30% of its power. I am afraid that I have overestimated it. It's too slow to increase the combat power and destructive power of the graceful spiritual Bao by using the upgrade of the realm. After all, it's not every day to upgrade one's realm. The further I go, the slower the speed of upgrading will be. To unleash the greater power of the graceful spiritual Bao, I still need some external factors. Qin Wushuang could see that this graceful spiritual Bao was completely natural. However, these 3 jade green arrows should be much inferior to the graceful spiritual Bao. Reasonably speaking, they should not be the arrows that matched the graceful spiritual Bao the earliest. Although, after a long time, the jade green arrows appear to be extremely compatible with the graceful spiritual Bao. However, in the end, the second wife was still the second wife. After all, there was a difference between the second wife and the first wife. Qin Wushuang felt that the first wife's arrows should be even more powerful when matched with this graceful spiritual Bao. To increase the destructive power of the graceful spiritual Bao, perhaps it would be feasible to do more research on the arrow aspect. There were many ways to increase the power of the arrows. For example, he could increase the quality of the arrows with materials, or add some skills and work on shooting techniques. Another example would be to add some elemental attacks and merge the profound attacks into the body of the arrows. All of these ways had a certain degree of feasibility. Of course, this was not something that could be done in 1 or 2 days. It required some time, opportunity, and material conditions. Besides the graceful spiritual Bao, during this period of time, Qin Wushuang had never spared any effort to feel the effects of the purple cloud divine fruit in his body. This divine fruit was indeed very miraculous. Qin Wushuang could already feel that the divine power of this divine fruit was passing through his back. There was a wave of power that kept attacking him. This power did not bring any pain to Qin Wushuang. On the contrary, it made Qin Wushuang feel a wonderful baptism every day. This was an indescribable feeling of beauty. Qin Wushuang knew that this was because the purple cloud yin-yang wings was only the divine power of the divine fruit that changed the shape of his body. With the help of its bones and muscles, combined with the power of nature, the purple cloud yin-yang wings were formed. It could be said that it complemented each other. Naturally, he could control it with a single thought. In these few days, Qin Wushuang had gradually put the graceful spiritual Bao's homework on the back burner. Instead, he focused on the purple cloud yin-yang wings. Because of the baptism and changes brought by the purple cloud divine fruit, he increasingly realized that another great breakthrough was beckoning him. The opportunity was knocking on his door. He had no reason not to seize it. Sitting on the hillside, Qin Wushuang's entire body was currently wrapped in a wonderful white light. From afar, this white light looked like a white tree. The top part of the tree was very swollen, while the bottom part was only Qin Wushuang's torso and limbs. At this moment, this white light was constantly changing into different shapes on Qin Wushuang's body. And the main area of activity for these changes was on Qin Wushuang's back. Qin Wushuang felt that the muscles and bones on his back, as well as each inch of his skin, seemed to be undergoing a natural test. It was as if he was undergoing a painless surgery. Next, finally, that white light stopped its previous activity. As if it had chosen a location, suddenly, the white light became even more dazzling from the two sides of Qin Wushuang's spine all the way to his ribs. This dazzling light kept elongating, and miraculously, it grew a pair of wings. These two large wings were even larger than the wings of the goshawk when they were spread out. Qin Wushuang's heart was as calm as still water. Unconsciously, his spiritual perception seemed to have reached an agreement with these white wings. They had formed a strong resonance. At this moment, Bao Bao and Lone also scrambled out from the dark. When they saw this scene from afar, they were astonished, excited, astonished, and somewhat in disbelief. So miraculous. Is this the purple cloud in yang wings? Lone clicked his tongue and praised. Of course not. That color is white. It's far from the level of the purple cloud wings. I think there are at least a few evolutionary processes in between, right? Bao Bao spoke with the tone of an expert. Lone was too lazy to respond to Bao Bao as he cried out, "Boss, try flying, try flying." Bao Bao also joined in the clamor. "Yes, boss, try flying. Let us see the world." Now, Qin Wushuang was also looking forward to it. He moved his spiritual perception, and the wings on his back started to move naturally. He kept flapping them and slowly flew up. Like a bird that had just learned how to fly, he started to glide slowly. However, the feeling of unfamiliarity only lasted for a moment. In a moment, Qin Wushuang's spiritual perception became familiar with this pair of wings. He could control it freely as if he was walking with his feet. Slowly, he became extremely skilled. "Wow, so cool. Boss, you're so mighty." Bao Bao shouted without restraint. And Lone kept shouting, speed up, boss, you must speed up." This kind of speed is not enough. Currently, Qin Wushuang was flying slowly. However, this was not his maximum speed. In fact, he had not even started to speed up. Now, he was only in the stage of adapting and exploring. Hearing Lone urging him to speed up, he was not in a rush. After getting used to it, he circled in the air for a moment. Then, he turned around and started to speed up. As soon as he flapped that pair of wings, he started to speed up. This speed was fast. As soon as he started to speed up, he entered the sprint stage. In a few ups and downs, he had traveled more than 100 miles. Qin Wushuang looked at the surrounding terrain with disbelief. He was sure that he had flown this far. Of course, this speed was much faster than traveling on foot. Even compared to those elite warriors at the Transformation Void Martial stage he had seen, he was not slow. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang was pleasantly surprised. This was his first time flying. If he could become more mature in the future and improve his skills, he could definitely achieve an even faster speed. Most importantly, the purple cloud yin-yang wings could evolve. Now, it was only the first form, and its speed was already impressive. Once it had evolved, its speed would be even more monstrous. Up to this moment, Qin Wushuang had finally realized the true power of the purple cloud spiritual fruit. Even if it was only a fruit, the power of the supreme Tao was shocking. He turned his wings and glided back to the crest mountain. He dropped before Bao Bao and Lone. Bao Bao and Lone cheered endlessly. Just when they were about to go up to congratulate Qin Wushuang, suddenly, they heard a weak curse from the mountain slope. "Darn it! Are you finally here?" Qin Wushuang, Bao Bao, and the others were greatly surprised by this shout. With a face full of astonishment, they could not help but look around. Clearly, this voice had come from inside the mountain and did not seem to have come from the outside world. Just when they were searching around, that voice scolded again. "Grandson, since you are here, just stand there and wait. I will come out. So what if you have chased me for 3 million miles? Ha ha. In the end, you will not get what you want." Qin Wushuang and Bao Bao looked at each other in dismay. Clearly, they did not know what the other party was talking about. "Sir, perhaps you are mistaken. We're just passing by this crest mountain and are training here for a few days. We are not enemies." "HM?" That voice was also stunned. After a moment of thinking, he mumbled to himself, You sound very young. You don't seem like it. Are you guys really not those grandsons of the Heavenly Punishing Villa and the Sound of Thunder sect? Heavenly Punishing Villa, Sound of Thunder sect? Qin Wushuang was shocked. If he remembered correctly, these two major sects were the supreme powerhouses among the Heavenly Emperor Eight Gates. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. After the multicolored lights withdrew, groups of martial artists dressed similarly walked out. These cultivators only had two types of clothing. Clearly, they were from two different factions. There were 9 people in total, 4 on one side and 5 on the other. One of the groups consisted of 4 people, all of whom were wearing crimson armor. As for the group of 5, they were all wearing black armor. Each and every one of them had an unfriendly look on their faces. Clearly, they were not people to be trifled with. An old man with a white beard said slowly, "It's here. This is his limit. Being able to escape to this place is already very impressive. Search around." On the side of the black armor, a tall and sturdy guy waved his hand and gave the order. Clearly, this tall and sturdy guy was the leader of the black armor group. Just when the team was about to spread out and search, that weak voice from before laughed. "Indeed, it's you bunch of grandsons. You finally found this place. Ha ha ha. Yin Qinyan, Wu Lihu, you follow me across half of the Xianyuan Mound. Are you tired? Ha ha ha." The more that voice spoke, the more proud he became. In the end, he laughed loudly. "Grandsons, how do you plan to serve me this time?" Yin Qinyan was that old man with the white beard and red armor. He was the leader of the red armor group. And Wu Lihu was that tall and sturdy guy from the black armor group. Wu Lihu opened his eyes wide and mocked him sarcastically. "Qin Shishuan, if you know what's good for you, then cooperate. Give us the thing. Perhaps we can leave you with a complete corpse." Thing? That person they called Qin Shishuan was the one with the weak voice. He sneered even more coldly. "Do you see that 10,000 feet high cliff next to you? That cliff that emits fire and acts like a super oven all year round? Humph. We don't have time to chat with you. If you know what's good for you, give us the thing. If you want the thing, it will depend on whether you have the courage to jump down that cliff. I don't care to lie to you. I have already thrown all the things you want into the furnace. Ha ha. We'll all go our separate ways. No one will get it. Qin, don't play such tricks. If you were willing to throw those things down this volcano cliff, you would not have risked your life to get them. If you know what's good for you, then give us the thing. At least we can leave you with a complete corpse." "Elder Yin, why are you talking nonsense with him? We have already destroyed his primordial spirit, and he is powerless to reverse the situation. Now, he is an arrow at the end of its flight. Why don't we take him down and torture him slowly? Let's see if he is more stubborn." This suggestion was made by that black-armored Wu Lihu. Yin Qinyan was old and rather mature. Upon hearing Wu Lihu's suggestion, he was somewhat worried. The Red Armor Group were disciples of the Heavenly Punishing Villa of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. And the Black Armor Group were elite warriors of the Sound of Thunder sect. This time, each of them had sent out 8 people. Initially, they were evenly matched in terms of numbers. However, during the process of pursuing Qin Shishuan had used many methods and killed 7 people. This way, the number of people on both sides had become unbalanced. For the Heavenly Punishing Villa, the more people that died, the less people they would have left. For many things, they must consider more. When Qin Wushuang heard up to this point, his heart thumped. Qin Shishuan? Hearing this name, could he be an elite warrior of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan? The matters in the world could not be so coincidental, right? Qin Wushuang still found it hard to believe. However, these two groups of people were elite warriors of the Heavenly Emperor Eight Gates. Then, it would not be strange if this Qin Shishuan had come from the Heavenly Mountain Qin clan. And most likely, the two powerhouses that had become enemies with the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan were the Heavenly Punishing Villa and the Sound of Thunder sect. While he was lost in his thoughts, suddenly he felt someone pat his back lightly. He immediately turned around and was almost startled. Behind him, there was actually a person. This person had a pale complexion and appeared somewhat weak. However, when he stood there, he still gave off an unbelievably powerful feeling. "Young man, follow me." As soon as this person spoke, Qin Wushuang immediately recognized that this person was Qin Shixuan. Qin Wushuang did not have any room to refuse. As if it was natural, he followed behind this person. Bao Bao and Lone also walked out carefully from the two sides and followed that person to travel through the stone forest. In a moment, they found a deep and serene entrance. After countless twists and turns, they did not know how far they had gone. In the end, it was an extremely serene and serene cave inside the mountain. Clearly, this cave had been artificially created. At the most active place of this volcano, although the creation of this cave was not the most extravagant, it had clearly taken a lot of hard work. After walking at least 20 or 30 miles deep into the cave, they finally arrived at a slightly wider platform. When Qin Shixuan walked here, clearly, he was extremely weak. His complexion was as white as a sheet of white paper. Qin Wushuang immediately took out a 9 reversal yang pill. "Mister, this pill," Qin Shixuan smiled lightly and did not reach out to take it. He only nodded slightly. "9 reversal yang pill, it's a good pill. Put away. I can't use it." "Hey, this pill is very effective. You suffered such heavy injuries. Are you still scared that we will poison you?" Bao Bao could not help but feel somewhat depressed when he saw him making excuses. "Even if it's poison, if it can heal my injuries, I will swallow it. Even if I drink poison to quench my thirst, I don't care." Qin Shixuan spoke with an indifferent tone, as if he had already seen through life and death. Only behind his indifference, in the end, there was a trace of regret. "As long as that poison could last me for 2 hours and let me kill a few more bastards, it would be the best. Haha. Unfortunately, with my primordial spirit shattered, I am afraid even the gods could not save me." In Qin Shixuan's eyes, some sparks of hatred flashed, and there was also some unwillingness. However, this unwillingness was not a lament for his life, but the sadness of being powerless to kill the enemy. "Mister, may I ask, are you from the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan?" As Qin Wushuang looked at Qin Shixuan vividly, there was a form of miraculous resonance inwardly. The temperament displayed by Qin Shixuan made Qin Wushuang feel such familiarity. This familiarity of being connected by blood made him resonate with a common hatred for the enemy from deep within his bones. What could be more depressing than being powerless to kill the enemy? Of course, Qin Wushuang could empathize with Qin Shixuan's current mood. Qin Shixuan laughed. "Little one, I've been waiting for your question for a long time." Qin Wushuang looked at Qin Shixuan with astonishment, and more or less disbelief appeared on his face. Qin Shixuan said with an indifferent smile, "When you guys first came to this crest mountain, I was meditating and planning to go against the natural order to heal my injuries. Thus, I did not sense your presence. However, when I woke up from my meditative state, I already felt your presence. At the same time, I also felt the bloodline of the Qin clan inside your body. If you were not in your explosive state, perhaps I would not have sensed it. However, when you were breaking through, that feeling of being connected by blood made me resonate with you. At that time, I was already suspicious. However, in the end, I was still worried that those 2 groups of bastards had deliberately created some illusion. They had deliberately created this illusion while I was injured and had lost my judgment. Senior, this way, you also know that our boss is a disciple of the Qin clan?" Bao Bao was slightly surprised. Qin Shixuan said with a smile, "It's not hard to confirm. The bloodline of the Qin clan is extremely unique. The purer the bloodline, the stronger the strength, the stronger the resonance between each other. By the way, I haven't asked you, young man, what is your name? Which branch of the Qin clan do you belong to? I have never seen a young man like you at the Heavenly Emperor Mountain." "I am Qin Wushuang, from the human countries." One could imagine that Qin Wushuang's answer also surprised Qin Shixuan. "From the human countries? I must say, It's somewhat unbelievable. Next, his attention stopped at the three words Qin Wu Shuang. Suddenly, his expression changed as he cried out involuntarily, Qin Wu Shuang? To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 475. Qin Wushuang was also shocked by Qin Wushuang's violent reaction as he nodded to confirm. Qin Wushuang. Bao Bao laughed. So you have also heard of our boss's name? Ha ha. It seems that the things my boss did in the human countries are truly extraordinary. Wherever he goes, people know about him. Boss, you're absolutely right. Gold will shine wherever it goes. Bao Bao was the kind of guy that would overflow with a little sunshine or a little flood. He had always felt good about himself and started to advocate for Qin Wushuang without stopping. He had completely forgotten the dangerous situation he was in. Qin Shixuan said with a bitter smile, I know nothing about the information from the human countries. Thus, I also know nothing about what Qin Wushuang did in the human countries. Instantly, Bao Bao felt that he had lost all his face as he smiled awkwardly. You have never heard of my boss's name. How come you seem to be surprised? It makes me feel like you are shocked. Shocked, it's true. Qin Shixuan smiled. Now, not many existences could shock me. Today, even if the #1 elite warrior of the heavenly punishing villa and the sound of thunder sect came, I would not be shocked. Then could it be that my boss is even more sensational than them? Although Bao Bao felt great about himself, he was not arrogant to that extent. Qin Shixuan's expression seemed to have fallen into deep thought. He was thinking about an extremely complicated matter, and from his expression, there were many signs of disbelief. Senior, when Qin Wushuang saw his strange expression, he could not help but remind him. Of course, he would not forget that at this wild flame cliff, a large group of enemies were eyeing them covetously. With a focused expression, Qin Shixuan raised his hand to stop Qin Wushuang from speaking. After thinking for a while, Qin Shixuan gave a light sigh and nodded. Young man, perhaps you should take a look at the headquarters of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. Qin Wushuang stared at Qin Wushuang without blinking. His expression was serious and full of expectation. Bao Bao could not help but say, Our boss came to the Xian Yuan Mound from the human countries to take a look at the headquarters of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. Hearing this, Qin Shixuan was overjoyed. He slapped his thigh and said, Good, good, good. After saying the word good many times in a row, Qin Shixuan's smile was already a bit choked up. His face was filled with happiness, as if he did not care about the fact that his life was about to end. Young man, listen carefully. Every word I'm about to say is extremely important. You have to keep that in mind. If you still identify with the bloodline of the Qin clan, please do not forget a single word. Qin Shixuan's eyes emitted an extremely sincere feeling. Moreover, they were also filled with anticipation and even somewhat worried as he gazed at Qin Wushuang. At this moment, Qin Wushuang was naturally duty-bound. Senior, if you have any requests, I will bring them to the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, to your family. Hearing his reply, Qin Shixuan's expression instantly relaxed, and he let out a long sigh. Filled with joy, he sighed softly, Family. My grandfather, parents, brothers, and uncles are all disciples of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, and they have all passed away before me. For myself, I am not married, and I have no children. In terms of my flesh and blood, I don't have a single one. However, in terms of family, which disciple of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan is not my family. In the end, the blood flowing in our veins comes from the same source. If I must bring any request to them, there are only 4 words. Never give up. Qin Shixuan's tone appeared serene. Apparently, the imminent life and death did not rob him of his dignity, his calmness, and his strength of character. When he faced death, he was as calm as when he was facing an afternoon nap. Listen, there are only 4 words. Never give up. For the Qin clan, there are not many things we can give up. Perhaps fate and fortune can give up the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. However, the disciples of the Qin clan must never give up their bloodline and honor. When Qin Shixuan said here, his tone also became urgent. Miraculously, a trace of blush had appeared on his pale face. He continued to speak with a weak tone. I don't have much time left. Perhaps in the next moment I will stop breathing. Thus I must strive for it. Long story short, when he said here, Qin Shixuan raised his arm and threw a fragrant sachet over. This sachet was wrapped with golden threads and appeared extremely beautiful. It also emitted a light fragrance. Inside this storage sachet are the things those guys are looking for. You guys take it. Qin Wushuang took it in his hand and weighed it slightly. It was extremely heavy. He could not help but reveal a strange expression between his brows. Don't feel strange. There's some extremely special metal materials and some rare things inside. Haha, don't feel strange. These things are not mine. A trace of a mischievous smile flashed across Qin Shixuan's expression. Those things were offered as a tribute by those guys who wanted to flatter the heavenly punishing villa. I heard about it. It would be a pity to not take the ill-gotten gains. Coincidentally, the heavenly punishing villa has always been the sworn enemy of the Qin clan. They invited people from the Sound of Thunder sect to hunt me down. I took them around the majority of the Xian Yuan Mound and fought a dozen of battles with them. I was ambushed by the Sound of Thunder sect, and my primordial spirit was injured. That's why I ended up in this situation. Qin Wushuang felt gloomy. This should be a microcosm of the rivalry between the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan and those two major sects for thousands of years. At this moment, Qin Wushuang was also certain that the two powerhouses that were making things difficult for the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan should be the Heavenly Punishing Villa and the Sound of Thunder sect. And the bounty to deal with the 100-Leaf Qin clan should have come from these two powerhouses. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang could not help but ask, Senior, the bounty to deal with the 100-Leaf Qin clan should have been done by these two groups of people, right? Lights flashed across Qin Shixuan's eyes. Apparently, Qin Wushuang's question had evoked countless memories of hatred in Qin Shixuan. He only heard Qin Shixuan say, That's right, it was done by them. Not only that, regardless of how secretive the transportation of crystal stones that the 100-Leaf Qin clan sent to support the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, they still robbed it. They robbed the Qin clan's wealth. Could it be that we cannot rob them? There was some madness in Qin Shixuan's tone. Apparently, although he had suffered severe injuries, he did not regret it. Yes, the light of my life is about to be extinguished. However, I do not regret it. Disciples of the Qin clan died for the clan. It is not shameful to be buried with the name of the Qin clan. The reason why the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan was able to hold on until now under the joint attack of these two powerhouses was because they had thousands of disciples that were not afraid of death and dared to risk their lives. They were sending a strong signal to the enemy. The battle with these two powerhouses had greatly damaged the vitality of the Qin clan. However, their days would not be easy either. While they were consuming the Qin clan, they were also being consumed at the same speed. For the clan, we would not hesitate to die. Young man, have you thought it through? For the clan, he would not hesitate to die. This was a form of belief. In fact, inside Qin Wushuang's heart, how could he not carry this belief? For the Eastwood Qin clan, for the Stargaze Palace, he had always practiced it. Qin Wushuang fixed his gaze at Qin Shixuan. After a while, he nodded decisively. For the clan, I would not hesitate to die. Not only me, all disciples of the Qin clan in the world are the same. When I was young, my father also taught me this. Besides, all the disciples of the Qin clan I met along the way also carried this belief firmly. Senior, I promise you. Overjoyed, Qin Shixuan's eyes were filled with joy. Good. You made the right choice and took over the inheritance of the Qin clan. Young man, remember, you must go to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. This is not a suggestion, but an advice. It's because I have a premonition that perhaps the fate of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan and even the fate of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain will be tied on your shoulders. Qin Wushuang was surprised. Senior, I will not explain now. When you go to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain, everything will become clear when the time is ripe. Qin Shixuan used an unquestionable tone to stop Qin Wushuang's doubts. At the same time, he said seriously, "Young man, in the end, I only have one request. Please say it. After I die, if you have a complete corpse, bring my body back to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. This way, even if I enter the grave, I will not feel restless and will sleep peacefully. If I die without a complete corpse, bring this necklace back to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain and bury it in the ancestral grave of the Qin clan in place of my body." Qin Shixuan said with an extremely serious tone, "This is my personal request." Qin Wushuang only felt a burst of bitterness in his throat, as if something had blocked his throat. For a time, he could not speak. He took that necklace with a serious expression. Qin Shixuan's expression no longer showed any trace of worry. Only calmness remained. "Young man, thank you." When Qin Shixuan said here, he stood up. "Now it's time for me to do something for you guys." Qin Wushuang looked at Qin Shixuan with surprise. For a time, he did not understand what he meant. Qin Shixuan said with a smile, "I have entrusted you with so much. It would only be meaningful if I can guarantee that you can leave here alive. Or else, wouldn't those words become useless nonsense?" Bao Bao and Lone looked at Qin Shixuan with suspicion. Apparently, they also saw through Qin Shixuan's current weakness. With his current physical condition, most likely he could not even beat an ordinary elite warrior, not to mention those elite warriors outside who are like wolves and tigers. For those people, especially the two strongest leaders, Qin Wushuang felt that the power from them was definitely stronger than Shen's son, an elite warrior at the profound void martial stage. In other words, most likely, that Yin Xingyun and Wu Lihu were elite warriors at the perfect void martial stage, although they had not shattered the void and reached the exquisite mysterious boundary stage. However, such elite warriors were existences that Qin Wushuang and the others could not challenge. However, Qin Shixuan seemed to have a card up his sleeve. He took out a piece of spiritual talisman from his bosom. That spiritual talisman opened up and instantly, it transformed into the void. With a flash of red light, a giant bird with a fiery red body like a phoenix jumped out. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 476. Clearly, this giant bird was the spiritual beast sealed inside the spiritual talisman. Only, the spiritual beasts sealed by the spiritual talisman were usually puppet beasts. The so-called puppet beasts were not lifeless puppets. Instead, it meant that the spiritual perception of this spiritual beast had been taken away by the one who sealed it. Instead, it was injected with 100% tamed spiritual perception to serve the person who used the spiritual talisman. It would be impossible for any accidents to happen. Qin Shixuan pointed to this giant bird and said with a smile, "This fire cloud phoenix can take you guys through the wild flame cliff. Follow me, young man." Qin Shixuan took Qin Wushuang and the others and went deeper into the cave. After many turns, they finally arrived at a tiny exit. This exit was already halfway up the cliff. The layout of this cave was somewhat similar to the cliff cave at Eastwood Town's Great Song Mountain. If Qin Wushuang had not sensed it carefully, he almost doubted that this crest mountain was the fourth loop of the 7 Deadly Arrays formation. Do you see this exit? In a moment, you guys will fly out from here. The fire cloud phoenix will take you guys out. Remember, you must wait until I return to the top of the stone forest at the wild flame cliff. Or else, you guys will not be able to slip away under their eyes. Only when I attract their attention, you guys will have hope. Senior, how can we do this? Qin Wushuang could not accept using other people's lives to cover his escape route. Qin Wushuang could not accept such a thing. This is an order. If you still recognize yourself as an offspring of the Qin clan, then execute it. From Qin Shixuan's eyes, determination and stubbornness did not allow Qin Wushuang to object. Senior, could it be we do not have any capital to fight with them? Bao Bao also felt that it would be too disloyal if they left like this. With a solemn expression, Qin Shixuan shook his head with determination. You three are only at the refined void martial stage. Any one of them would be a huge pressure for you. For your information, the two leaders are at the perfect void martial stage. The other four are at the profound void martial stage. And the transformation void martial stage is even less, only 3. Do you think that with your strength, you three have the power to fight? Qin Wushuang was speechless. He had to admit that if they were to fight, it would be like trying to smash an egg against a rock. He basically had no chance of winning, even if he had a divine weapon like the graceful spiritual bow. To the current Qin Wushuang, the perfect void martial stage was too far away. Senior, if you had a divine weapon, could it be you could not beat them? Suddenly, Bao Bao asked. Qin Shixuan laughed bitterly. A divine artifact, if possible. There's no need to discuss this. Firstly, we don't have any divine weapons. Secondly, even the most powerful divine weapon in the world is useless at this moment. Because my primordial spirit is already shattered, I can't fight at all. Qin Wushuang's heart dimmed, as he already knew that Senior Qin Shixuan had indeed already established the will to die. However, even though he knew this, it was still a difficult decision for him to abandon Qin Shixuan and leave. Go, young man. If it didn't destroy my corpse, if you return to Crest Mountain in the future, then bring my corpse back to Crest Mountain. Or else, let that chain enter the Qin ancestral grave for me, along with this strand of hair. After he had finished speaking, Qin Shixuan turned his palm into a blade and cut off a bunch of hair from his head. He handed it to Qin Wushuang solemnly. Remember, your hesitation will betray my trust. I hope you guys will leave without looking back after receiving the signal. Patting Qin Wushuang's shoulder, Qin Shixuan did not speak anymore and turned around to enter the cave. Although his back appeared stooped and his footsteps were weak from his back and steps, there was not the slightest sign of retreat or hesitation. This was a form of calm heroism, a form of silent generosity. What was the meaning of facing death with equanimity? This was it. Qin Shixuan's footsteps were as if he was walking home. Home. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang felt a sudden pain in his heart. Each of Qin Shixuan's details, each of his actions, and each of his instructions had revealed his deep love for the Qin family. Even in death, he would not forget to return to his hometown. Strangely, Bao Bao and Lone did not speak a word. Usually, these two chatterboxes who loved to bicker and show off also did not speak a word this time. Although they were beasts, Qin Shixuan's demeanor had indeed won their admiration. Boss, don't think about it. We must not miss the opportunity that Senior Qin Shixuan has created for us. Or else, how can we fulfill his trust in the future? If you truly want to do something for Senior Qin Shixuan, then put all this sadness in your heart. Perhaps, bringing his bones back to the Qin ancestral grave was only a little wish of his. If he can lead the Qin family to prosperity, I believe it would be the best consolation for him. Although Bao Bao was small, he had a nimble mind. Of course, Qin Wushuang understood these principles. However, with Bao Bao's guidance, it had instantly brightened his mood and swept away all the haze in his heart. He must admit that Bao Bao's words were reasonable. At this moment, it would be the biggest disappointment to Senior Qin Shixuan if he were to indulge in sadness. With his primordial spirit shattered, apparently, Senior Qin Shixuan had the will to die. Bastards, what are you looking for? Qin Shixuan's voice emerged from the top of the high cliff. This time, Qin Shixuan's voice was abnormally loud and clear. However, this loud and clear voice made Qin Wushuang feel as if needles were pricking his heart. He knew that Qin Shixuan was reminding them. At the same time, he was attracting the enemy's attention and creating opportunities for them. Indeed, this cry had attracted people from all directions of the stone forest. They formed a few circles around Qin Shixuan. Qin Shixuan, let's see where you can run to this time. Wu Lihu swore with extreme malice. Qin Shixuan laughed. Good grandson, when did I say I was going to run? I'm not going anywhere until I have killed enough of you bastards. Kill us? Wu Lihu said with a cold sneer. with your little capital that can be blown away by a gust of wind? I will say it one last time. Bring out the thing. Qin Shishun pointed to that wild flame cliff from afar. Do you see it? The thing is there if you have the guts. Jump down and take it. Yin Qingyun said coldly. Qin Shishun, enough. No more acting. Regardless of how you try to hide it, you cannot change the fact that your primordial spirit is shattered. Today, it's impossible for you to escape from here. Qin Shishun said leisurely. When did I say I was going to run? I came to this crest mountain and chose this wild flame cliff to pick a natural grave for you guys. You are still so stubborn when you are about to die. Wu Lihu swore loudly. Although this was the case, he did not dare to act recklessly. Although Qin Shishun's primordial spirit was shattered and he no longer possessed the power to threaten them, he would never do such a thing if he were asked to be the vanguard. After all, the Sound of Thunder sect had only received an invitation. It was unnecessary for them to fight too fiercely for the things of the heavenly punishing villa. Of course, to the Sound of Thunder sect, killing the disciples of the Qin clan would always be a theme that they would never get tired of. It was a theme that could stimulate the passion of all disciples of the Sound of Thunder sect. Qin Shishun opened both of his hands, and suddenly, two spiritual talismans scuttled from his hands. Instantly, it seemed as if two long dragons had rushed out from his sleeves. They scuttled in the air and instantly transformed into two long dragon-like hurricanes. They whistled in all directions, and for a time, sand and pebbles flew everywhere. This spiritual talisman was extraordinary. Once the wind attribute energy was unleashed, it almost enveloped the stone forest within a few dozen miles. Many stone mountains also started to shake. Some even flew in the air and crashed in all directions. The flying stone mountains instantly caused the entire wild flame cliff to fall into an uproar. There was a wild temperament, as if the earth was quaking and the mountains were shaking. Ha ha! Heavenly punishing, Sound of Thunder, the bastard of your two sects. Today, I will activate the volcano of the wild flame cliff, and everyone will be buried in this world of fire. Qin Shishun laughed wantonly, and his tone was filled with madness. Instantly, those 9 people were greatly shocked as they all flew towards the sky. Apparently, they were extremely nervous at Qin Shishun's threat. Yin Qingyun and Wu Lihu remained calm amidst the chaos. Both transformed into 2 rays of light and waved the weapons in their hands continuously. They formed a few rapid attacks and went to greet Qin Shishun. Let's go. Almost at the same time as Qin Shishun laughed loudly, Qin Wushuang activated the Fire Cloud Phoenix and immediately charged out of the cave. The scorching high temperature almost made their bones melt. Their hair, their skin, every inch of their body was tested and destroyed by this merciless high temperature. One had to know that this was only the upper middle part of the cliff. The Fire Cloud Phoenix also did not fly upwards. Instead, it made a detour towards the east and left the wild flame cliff. 4 rays of light, like 4 meteors falling from the sky, all greeted Qin Shishun's physical body. Boom! Golden light shot in all directions. Although Qin Shishun's physical body also had a protective spiritual talisman, when the 4 rays of light attacked, the golden light shattered and the defensive power of the spiritual talisman was instantly broken. With the defensive power broken, Qin Shishun's physical body naturally had no way of resisting this wild combined attack. Only a loud boom could be heard. Qin Shishun's body instantly shattered in all directions. It was like a shattered mirror with shards flying in all directions. In midair, Yin Qingyun and Wu Lihu both felt a wave of relief. Dead. He was finally dead. Qin Shishun was dead. Finally, this great threat would no longer pose any threat to them. And the pupils of one of the elite warriors of the heavenly punishing villa suddenly contracted rapidly. He pointed towards the far east. A black shadow was currently quickly disappearing into the void. LDN, what is that? Someone is escaping. Could it be Qin Shishun's accomplice? Yin Qingyun and Wu Lihu's gazes were also immediately attracted by the black dot in the distance. Looking from afar, the the speed of the black, that actually made them slightly surprised. Chase. Yin Qingyun and Wu Lihu had this thought almost at the same time. Both of them sprinted forward. Their figures in midair were like eagles swooping down. Their speed was extremely fast. Wu Lihu's arms shook and a bow, an arrow appeared in his hands. He said to Yin Qingyun, "Brother Yin, lend me a hand." They knew that at this moment, they were too far away from the enemy. If they sprinted over, considering the terrain of the wild flame cliff, it would be difficult to catch up. Only by catching the enemy from a distance and combining the power of the two, would they have a chance of keeping the enemy. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 477. Boss, someone discovered us. Bao Bao had good eyesight. He turned around and saw the situation behind him. Two elite warriors at the perfect Void Martial stage were already dashing over with all their strength. Only, the speed of the Fire Cloud Phoenix was no less than the elite warriors at the perfect Void Martial stage. Between each other, they always maintained a distance that could not be closed nor widened. Not good. Suddenly, Bao Bao's pupil shrank because he clearly saw that at this moment, Wu Lihu was piling on top of Yin Qingyun's body. Suddenly, a wave of yellow light shot out. Like a wave of gigantic pushing force, it had ejected Wu Lihu's body. Boom! Instantly, Wu Lihu's body shot over like an arrow at twice the speed. The most fatal part was that Wu Lihu extended his arms. With one hand holding the bow, the other hand knocked an arrow whoosh. One arrow, another arrow. Although that bow and arrow was not as heaven-defying as the graceful spiritual bow, under the use of an elite warrior at the perfect Void Martial stage, it still had the power to swallow and spit out wind and thunder. It had the power to destroy the world. That arrow carried an imposing manner that could shatter the sky as it shot forward. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived before them. Bao Bao immediately urged the Fire Cloud Phoenix downward. Whoosh! That arrow had almost whizzed past their ears and shot toward the cliff on the opposite side. Now, there was a 90-degree turn on the cliff. With a boom, the arrow had shot into the cliff, and instantly, a giant hole had sunk into the cliff. The hole was as wide as a few acres of land. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was shocked. This power was on par with a bomb from his former world. This arrow is only a warning. Wu Lihu's voice sounded coldly. After 3 arrows, if you don't stop, I will let you guys experience the feeling of 10,000 arrows piercing your heart. While he spoke, he grabbed a dozen arrows with his hand and placed them on the bow. These arrows seemed to be sticky as they stuck to the bowstring. Boss! Bao Bao's heart sank. This person has superb archery skills. The situation is not looking good. Although Qin Shushuan's plan was flawless, taking into account all the favorable and unfavorable conditions, he never would have thought that this Wu Lihu still had this trump card up his sleeve. Jimo's eyes turned red. The power of one arrow is already so strong. With so many arrows, it's impossible to dodge. This was the truth. Although Wu Lihu had shot 3 arrows in a row, he had shot them one after the other. He had not used a rapid shooting method. His goal was to force Qin Wushuang and the others to stop. Wu Lihu's goal was the things that Qin Shushuan had snatched away. Therefore, he had yet to display his strongest archery skill. Boss, why don't we just go back and fight it out with him? Although Lone was facing a life and death situation, his blood and qi were not weak. He was not afraid of death. No, Bao Bao denied it. If we go back, none of the 3 of us could defeat someone at the perfect Void Martial stage. Qin Wushuang nodded. Bao Bao, I will switch places with you guys. I will be at the back. Bao Bao said urgently. Boss, at this time, at most you can block 1 arrow from the back. You cannot block all those arrows for us. Lone yelled. Then I will be at the back. My defense is stronger. My skin is thick. Qin Wushuang gave a long sigh. The destructive power of the perfect Void Martial stage is not only limited to physical attacks. Their attacks will certainly penetrate the primordial spirit, especially since we have just formed our primordial spirit. We cannot withstand the destruction of the perfect void martial stage. Bow bow, urge the fire cloud phoenix and fly down. Boss, although this fire cloud phoenix is a puppet battle beast, it also has a little bit of consciousness. The lower we go, the greater the heat. Even if it is the fire cloud phoenix, it cannot endure it. If we go down, we will all be melted. Even if we are melted, it's better than dying at the hands of these bastards. Lone gave a long sigh. Suddenly, Bao Bao said, Boss, Senior Qin Shirshuan created an opportunity for us and sacrificed himself. Now, perhaps, it's time for me and Second to sacrifice ourselves for you. Second, if we let Boss go alone, would you be willing? The purple flame electric beast harumphed and said, Since the moment I was unsealed by Boss, it was destined that my life existed for him. Isn't it just death? They are not even afraid of humans. How could us spiritual beasts lose to them? Just when Qin Wushuang was about to speak, Bao Bao stopped him. Boss, it's time to make a decision. If you don't go, all three of us will die. If you go, perhaps you can live. You can avenge us in the future. Qin Wushuang said in a low voice. You guys go, I will cover you. Bao Bao said miserably. Boss, we can't leave. We don't have the ability to ride the air and cannot fly alone. Only you have this skill. We will continue to ride the fire cloud phoenix and drop down into the abyss. You will continue to fly ahead. The further down you go, the thicker the smoke will be and the more it will cover your escape. Boss, go quickly. Go. Lone also roared in a low voice. In the 2 lifetimes that Qin Wushuang had lived, he had never had the experience of abandoning his friends. Now, although he was urged by Bao Bao and Lone, he remained unmoved. Second, third, when we entered the Xian Yuan Mound, we already said that we will always be together. We will make our way together and build our reputation together. Qin Wushuang said slowly, I can't do it if you want me to keep you guys. Bao Bao said urgently, Boss, don't forget your family, your sect, and the Qin clan are all waiting for you. While they were arguing, Wu Lihu's voice came from afar. Humph, if you guys keep flying down, unless you fall off the cliff, don't think about evading my attack. I will count to 10. If you guys don't slow down, prepare to have a tragic cremation at this wild flame cliff. Bao Bao and Lone looked at each other. At this moment, they had a tacit understanding. At the same time, they extended their hand and pushed Qin Wushuang's shoulder. They shouted in a low voice, Boss, go! Caught off guard, Qin Wushuang was pushed by these 2 waves of power. His body flew out directly and pushed forward at a rapid speed. Naturally, the pair of wings on his back opened. Almost at this moment, Bao Bao and Lone turned the fire cloud phoenix and dashed towards Wu Lihu's direction. Wu Lihu's expression changed as he said with a sneer, You guys are digging your own graves. Lone swore, Grandson, you want to kill us? In your next life. After he had finished, he and Bao Bao extended their palms and hit the 2 wings of the fire cloud phoenix directly. Feeling the pain, the fire cloud phoenix's wings instantly froze, and it could not exert any strength. In the middle of the air, it fell headfirst down the high cliff at a rapid speed. Naturally, the speed of its free fall was extremely fast. One only saw a flash of fire below, and the monstrous flame engulfed the figure of Bao Bao and Lone directly like a hungry and thirsty beast. Qin Wushuang only heard the miserable cry of the fire cloud phoenix and knew that something was wrong. A wave of sharp pain emerged from his chest, as if someone had pierced his chest with a sharp blade. The pain was incomparable. Crest Mountain. Not even in Qin Wushuang's dreams did he expect that this Crest Mountain would become the place where he would part with Bao Bao and Lone. This unexpected disaster was completely out of his expectation. Bao Bao and Lone's suicidal fall from the cliff had also left Wu Lihu dumbstruck. He put away his bow and looked down with a blank expression. He only saw countless flames scuttling up, and the red light was like a ferocious beast that had been suppressed for tens and thousands of years. Even someone as strong as Wu Lihu felt waves of throbbing and could not help but have goosebumps all over his body. While he was in a daze, the Yin Qingyun also caught up and asked, "What's wrong?" Wu Lihu shook his head with a bitter smile. "They went down." "They went down?" Yin Qingyun looked at the raging fire below with disbelief. It was like a boiling furnace that could erupt the destructive hellfire at any moment. Each of these people of the Qin clan is not afraid of death. Wu Lihu was deeply moved. He did not have the slightest courage to jump down from such a place, even if there were countless people chasing after them. "Are you sure that group of people are also disciples of the Qin clan? If they are not disciples of a Qin clan, who would work for Qin Shixuan?" Wu Lihu asked back. "That might not be the case. When we chased after Qin Shixuan until here, we did not see any helpers along the way." Inwardly, Yin Qingyun felt extremely vexed. Although Qin Shixuan had died, they did not get the goods. And Qin Shixuan's death was not a loss. The number of casualties from the heavenly punishing villa and the sound of thunder sect was enough for Qin Shixuan to die in peace. Wu Lihu was even more depressed. After running around for such a long time, they had wasted so much manpower and time. In the end, they had gained nothing. Per the agreement between the Sound of Thunder sect and the Heavenly Punishing Villa, they would get 30% of the goods they had recovered. For this 30%, the Sound of Thunder sect had sent elite warriors to help. However, in the end, it was like drawing water with a sieve. One could imagine the disappointment in his heart. And Wu Lihu's attention was focused on the Fire Cloud Phoenix. Bao Bao and Lone had hidden their moves and pushed Qin Wushuang out with the smoke that filled the sky. However, in the end, it had escaped Wu Lihu's eyes. When Bao Bao and Lone had returned to the Wild Flame Cliff, Wu Lihu was even more shocked by this scene. Naturally, he did not have the time to think about anything else. Qin Wushuang felt as if a knife had pierced his heart as he flew forward numbly. He did not know how long he had flown, and finally, he had flown out of the territory of the Crest Mountain. And Qin Wushuang was not in the mood to pay attention to the terrain. His mind was in a mess, and he only had Bao Bao and Lone's smiling faces. Everything that had happened in the past vividly emerged in his mind. However, at this moment, Qin Wushuang was powerless. Inwardly, he could only pray, "Bao Bao, Lone, you guys will be fine. You will be fine. Don't forget, we have not fulfilled the promise we made when we entered the Xian Yuan Mound." When he thought here, Qin Wushuang spat out a mouthful of blood with a wah sound. Flying at a rapid speed at the Wild Flame Cliff had pushed Qin Wushuang's primordial spirit to its limit. Plus, he had just entered the refined Void Martial stage and had not had the time to consolidate his strength. Because Bao Bao and Lone had fallen off the cliff, his mind had received a violent blow and caused great damage to his primordial spirit. Qin Wushuang only felt that the wings on his back were becoming less and less obedient, and his consciousness was becoming more and more blurred. He barely managed to land on a lower ground. Just as he had landed, his mind was shaken violently. He did not know where he had landed, and he had fainted. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 478. After 3 days and 3 nights of flying, Qin Wushuang could not believe how much distance he had traveled. After an unknown amount of time, Qin Wushuang slowly regained consciousness. As soon as he regained consciousness, he sat up abruptly. Then, with a light snort, he felt a wave of intense pain from his chest and back. The most fatal part was that there was a burning sensation below his lower abdomen. The pain almost made him grimace in pain. Shaking his head, Qin Wushuang's vision gradually regained clarity. It blocked the light coming in from outside the window. Then, he started to size up the surrounding environment. This was a straw hut. The area inside the hut was not big, and the furnishings were also simple and crude. There was only a small bed he was lying on. Next to the bed, there was a small table and 2 bamboo chairs. These were the furnishings of the entire room. Qin Wushuang stopped his gaze on that bamboo chair and thought, "What is this place? The owner has a good state of mind. This bamboo chair is so exquisitely woven. He is indeed an elegant person. He looked outside and saw that there was a small stove in the corridor with a fire burning. On top of that stove, there was a pot. Apparently, something was being cooked. Dense green smoke was also emitting from a stove. Qin Wushuang stood up and felt the situation of his body. He realized that the injuries on his body had gotten better. Only inside his dantian, that newly formed primordial spirit, was still in an extremely weak state. Qin Wushuang knew that for sure it was because he had activated his dantian excessively. Although he did not calculate, he had indeed flown for a long time before he lost consciousness. Bao Bao Lone, are you guys okay? Qin Wushuang thought silently. In the end, he did not believe that the wild flame cliff would be the final destination for these three brothers. He also did not believe that Bao Bao and his brothers would have such a short life. Regardless, Bao Bao had the bloodline of the ancient spiritual monkey. How could he have such a short life with the bloodline of the divine clan? Just as he was feeling sad, suddenly his ears twitched as he heard small footsteps coming from outside the house. These footsteps were not slow, yet they landed lightly. Apparently, it was a girl walking. Qin Wushuang raised his head and looked outside the door. He saw a young girl dressed in green walking down from the slope diagonally opposite with a basket. From the way this young girl dressed, she was a village girl. However, when he observed her temperament and eyes, she seemed to have walked out of a painting. She was so pure that one would feel that she was a natural spirit. When that young girl dressed in green saw Qin Wushuang, she was stunned. Then, two red clouds floated across her face. She slowed down her footsteps and put the basket in the corner. "Young girl, is this your home?" Seeing this young girl, Qin Wushuang, of course, Qin Wushuang, Qin Wushuang, of course. That young girl's Wushuang. He walked to the side of the stove, took a piece of cloth used as a cushion, and opened the lid of the jar. He took a look and smelled it. Wushuang. He turned around and picked up a fan. Then, he placed it beside the fire and fanned it continuously. Throughout the whole process, the young girl's face was red. Qin Wushuang had a series of questions in his mind, but seeing this young girl's shy expression, he did not continue to ask. He lifted his foot and walked outside, wanted to take in some fresh air. "You?" The young girl stood up and looked at Qin Wushuang with concern. Although her cheeks were red, her eyes were as clear as a spring. Qin Wushuang showed a puzzled expression. "Young girl, what's wrong?" "It's windy outside." The young girl's voice was very low, and she even stuttered a little. Qin Wushuang smiled. "Don't be afraid. I'll walk around and take a look." Seeing Qin Wushuang turn around and leave, the young girl chased after him for a few steps and stopped. There are wild beasts in this valley. Qin Wushuang saw this young girl's serious face, especially her clear eyes. She did not have any worldly desires. Clearly, she had good intentions. She was worried that his body had not recovered. Feeling something, Qin Wushuang stopped his footsteps. He stood outside the corridor and looked around. This was a deep and serene valley. As for the straw house, it was built in an extremely simple and crude manner. Behind a thatched house, there was a gurgling brook. Across the brook, there was a village. This was a spectacle. On the other side of the brook, there were villages and farmhouses everywhere, but on this side, there was only one thatched house, giving people a feeling of seclusion. Seeing that Qin Wushuang did not leave, the young girl was relieved. She walked into the house, took a bowl, lifted the pot on the stove, and poured the boiled herbs into the bowl. Qin Wushuang sniffed and smelled the fragrance of herbs. He could not help but look back and see the young girl holding the bowl, walking towards him. Qin Wushuang was surprised. "For me to drink?" That young girl nodded. "After you drink the medicine, your wounds will heal faster." Just when Qin Wushuang wanted to refuse, when he saw the young girl's serious expression, he could not bear to disobey her. He took the bowl, blew on it a few times, and drank it all. On the side, that young girl revealed a trace of a smile when she saw Qin Wushuang had finished drinking the medicine. Apparently, she was also very happy. "Thank you, young girl. Can I ask, what is this place?" Qin Wushuang looked at the tall mountains surrounding this valley. They were all extremely high, connecting the sky to the clouds. Clearly, this was not an ordinary place. This place is called the Bowl Valley. Bowl Valley. Qin Wushuang had studied the terrain of the Xian Yuan Mound. However, on those maps, there was no indication of a place like the Bowl Valley. Apparently, this Bowl Valley was not an extremely important place. Or else, it would have been impossible for it not to have a name on the map. The Bowl Valley. Which prefecture is in charge of this place? Qin Wushuang asked again. The young girl was somewhat at a loss. Apparently, she did not understand the meaning of Qin Wushuang's words. When Qin Wushuang saw her expression, he could not help but feel somewhat depressed. It seemed that this Bowl Valley was so small that the government was not even interested in keeping statistics. This way, it should be a paradise that drifted away from the mainstream. When that young girl saw Qin Wushuang's somewhat disappointed expression, she felt somewhat apologetic. However, she could not help and could only take Qin Wushuang's empty bowl. She walked to the little stream to wash it. Qin Wushuang knew that most likely this young girl had lived here for a long time and knew nothing about the outside world. Looking at her untainted eyes, it was so pure that it made one's heart ache. Qin Wushuang felt embarrassed to continue to ask questions to prevent her from feeling embarrassed and guilty if she could not answer. He could only stand on the side and watch that young girl tidy up inside and out. In total, there were only 3 thatched huts. One of them was where Qin Wushuang had lived, and the other one was in front of a giant medicine cabinet. The last one had its door lightly closed. It should be this young girl's room. As for the kitchen and the firewood room, they could only build a simple shed in the corridor. As Qin Wushuang looked at the scene before him, for a time, he felt bitter inwardly. Such simple life had appeared in a forbidden spiritual zone like the Xian Yuan Mound. For your information, to the human countries, the Xian Yuan Mound was definitely a place filled with blood and slaughter. Unexpectedly, there was such a peaceful place. From each of the movements of this young girl, clearly, she was not a martial artist. However, this young girl was quite capable. In a moment, she had prepared a table of food. Although the dishes were simple and there were only 4 plates, they were all simple dishes. Only, with the help of this young girl's cooking skills, these simple dishes had an extraordinary color and fragrance that whetted one's appetite. Time to eat. Initially, that young girl wanted to call out to him, but she did not know how to address him. Qin Wushuang nodded kindly. My surname is Qin. Yes, brother Qin, let's eat. That young girl scooped 2 bowls of rice and 2 pairs of chopsticks. 1 pair of chopsticks and 1 bowl of rice were placed next to Qin Wushuang. Only after Qin Wushuang had sat down did that young girl sit down. Young girl, it's just the 2 of us eating? Where's your family? Qin Wushuang could not help but ask. Only my grandfather. He has passed away. That young girl's voice was calm. Even when talking about life and death, her tone was indifferent. Oh, Qin Wushuang gave a light sigh and did not know what to say. He could only keep his head down and eat with all his strength. He must say that the cooking skills of this young girl had greatly whetted Qin Wushuang's appetite. After eating 4 bowls of rice, Qin Wushuang finally felt satisfied. When he saw that young girl looking at him with a smile, he put down the bowl and chopsticks and laughed at himself. Young girl's cooking skills are very good. I unconsciously ate 2 more bowls. The young girl smiled lightly. There is still a lot of rice. However, Qin Wushuang did not know that the villagers here could easily eat 7 or 8 bowls of this kind of bowl. After eating, Qin Wushuang realized that he should do something instead of just standing at the side as a spectator. He immediately cleaned up the bowls and chopsticks. That young girl hurriedly said, Big brother Qin, let me do this. Qin Wushuang smiled embarrassedly, looked around, and volunteered. Then I will chop the firewood. Big brother Qin, there is enough firewood, you should rest. Qin Wushuang did not know whether to laugh or cry. Young girl, in any case, let me do something. Otherwise, I will feel like a good-for-nothing who only eats and does not work. Just as they were talking, a loud voice from the other side of the stream shouted, Dr. Shui, quickly come and take a look. Old Mo's wife has collapsed again. That young girl heard the shout and was slightly surprised. She hurriedly put down the work in her hands and walked to the pharmacy. She took out a bamboo medicine box and said to Qin Wushuang, "Big brother Qin, you rest here. I will go and take a look." "Young girl, you are a doctor?" "It is the medical skills passed down by my grandfather," that young girl said, and hurriedly rushed to the other side. Who would have known that it was high tide at this time? The water of the stream had already overflowed the bamboo bridge. So when that young girl crossed the bridge, she had to be extremely careful. She spread her hands to both sides and walked step by step toward the other side. In Qin Wushuang's eyes, it was like an acrobat walking on a tightrope in his previous life. Qin Wushuang's heart was moved. He floated over and gently touched that young girl's arm. His feet touched the water and landed on the opposite bank. That young girl was stunned. She looked at Qin Wushuang's expression with a bit of astonishment. "I will accompany you to take a look," Qin Wushuang said sincerely. The young girl thought for a while and softly said, "Yes." Her lips moved, wanting to ask something, but in the end, she did not ask. This village had about a few hundred families and a population of less than 3,000. Judging from their attire, they should be the most ordinary mountain people. The kind that relied on the mountain to live off the mountain, and the kind that relied on the water to live off the water. The sick person was a 30-something-year-old woman. At this moment, her face was pale, and she was lying on a wooden plank. Her breathing was rapid, as if she could stop breathing at any time. Seeing that young girl, everyone looked as if they had seen their savior. "Dr. Shui, quickly come and take a look." That young girl walked over and felt her pulse. Her eyebrows slightly wrinkled. A moment later, that young girl asked, "Sister-in-law Mo, did you go to the Tortoise King Mountain?" Speaking of the Ghost King Mountain, all the mountain people's faces changed at the same time, as if they had seen a ghost. Their expressions were full of fear. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 479. The village woman was originally unconscious, but when she heard the words Tortoise King Mountain, her entire body convulsed. Her eyes suddenly opened, but her pupils rapidly contracted. It was a complete reaction from excessive shock. The village woman's hands were clawing at the air, and her teeth were chattering. In front of the village woman's bed, a mountain man cried bitterly, "Dr. Shui, can my wife be saved?" The young girl's face was gloomy, and her expression was apologetic. Clearly, there was no cure. "No!" The mountain man, Mo Laosi, cried out in grief. He knelt in front of the bed and kowtowed to the young girl. "Dr. Shui, I beg you. You must have a way to save my child's mother. I beg you." The young girl had a sorrowful expression. "Big brother Mo, you shouldn't have let sister-in-law go to Tortoise King Mountain." Qin Wushuang, who was standing behind the young girl, had a change of expression. He suddenly walked to the bed and grabbed the village woman's wrist. He felt her pulse and used his divine sense to check the village woman's pulse. "What are you doing? Who is he?" When the surrounding people saw Qin Wushuang suddenly appear, they all cursed. Clearly, they were very surprised by the appearance of a stranger like Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang didn't wait for these people to speak. He pointed at the village woman's body several times in the air. He said to the young girl, "Miss, where is Tortoise King Mountain?" The young girl was slightly surprised. "Big brother Qin, also no medicine? She isn't sick, nor is she poisoned by the miasma in the mountains. It's obvious that she has been poisoned with a goo." Qin Wushuang sighed softly. "Goo?" The young girl didn't quite understand. Qin Wushuang didn't know how to explain it. Goo techniques were a mysterious method to begin with. It was very difficult to explain the existence of such things with pharmacological theory. Yes, once poisoned with a goo technique, unless the person who poisoned her is found, even 100 medicines won't be able to save her. Has anyone in the village shown such symptoms before? As soon as Qin Wushuang asked this question, instantly, he attracted the gazes of admiration from the surrounding people. One by one, They knelt on the ground. Young master from the outside, in recent years, more than 10 people have died mysteriously in our village. The young girl added, they all went to the Tortoise King Mountain. That place is very dangerous. The Tortoise King Mountain was about a few hundred miles away from this bowl valley. The mountain people here would often search for some mountain goods in the surrounding deep mountains. Although the Tortoise King Mountain was relatively far away, it was the place with the most abundant mountain goods and the easiest place to earn money. Some of the aboriginals had gone to the Tortoise King Mountain and were lucky enough to succeed once or twice. The things they obtained could be sold at very high prices in the towns outside. Therefore, even if it was a dangerous place, these people were very enthusiastic about going to the Tortoise King Mountain to seek wealth. Qin Wushuang frowned and said, I temporarily used some method to suppress the movement of the goo in her body. However, if we can't find the person who cast the goo, this goo will act up sooner or later. Hearing Qin Wushuang's words, Emo Laosi turned around and knelt down at Qin Wushuang. He could not stop begging. Young master from the outside, I beg you to be kind, I beg you. Qin Wushuang nodded. I will go to the Tortoise King Mountain to take a look. Don't worry, it will not be a problem to hold on for 7 days. I will try my best to find the owner of the goo in this time. That young girl moved her mouth as if she wanted to say something. However, under such circumstances, as a doctor with the heart of a parent, she could not say anything to stop him. Qin Wushuang followed this young girl and returned to the thatched hut on the other side of the river. Brother Qin, are you really going to the Tortoise King Mountain? That young girl asked. Normally, with Qin Wushuang's current situation, it was not appropriate for him to meddle in other people's business. However, he had just experienced a life and death parting with Bao Bao. When he saw the mournful and hopeless expression of Mo Laoxi's family, his heart throbbed. Also, he saw that the tall mountains surrounding this bowl valley had a solemn atmosphere and did not seem to be a nameless place. Thus, he also wanted to explore. Most importantly, he must find a way out of the valley and get back on the right track. When that young girl saw Qin Wushuang mumbling to himself in silence, she gave a faint sigh and carried the medicine box on her back. I will go with my dear brother. You're going too? Qin Wushuang was shocked. I can go alone. That young girl said with a determined tone, Brother Qin, I am a doctor. If the mountain people got poisoned at the Tortoise King Mountain, I can find the corresponding medicinal herbs according to the source of the poison. It will be easier to deal with it. But didn't you say that the Tortoise King Mountain is dangerous? That young girl nodded, and her tone remained as calm as water. I am a doctor. It is dangerous to go into the mountain to pick medicinal herbs. However, those wild beasts in the mountain all let me go when they saw me. Wild beasts let you go? He had never heard of such a thing. Could it be that the wild beasts surrounding this bowl valley were all vegetarians, or cultivated their bodies and minds? How could they let go of a defenseless human? Brother Qin, I am not lying to you. Qin Wushuang found it inconceivable and said with a bitter smile, maybe I am ignorant and inexperienced, or maybe there is something special on you. At this point, Qin Wushuang's tone was also determined. But this time, you really don't have to go. I promise you, that is definitely not the poisonous gas of the mountain. It is a man-made goo poison. This kind of poison is not useful to doctors. It can only be removed if the person who used the goo poison dies. You want to kill someone? That young girl's expression instantly changed, and she lightly bit her lips. She was really a girl made of water. Qin Wushuang looked at this young girl and sighed inwardly. This was really a girl who was completely untainted by the secular world, a hidden spirit. Those who use this kind of goo poison to harm people are bad people. If the bad people don't die, the good people will suffer. Qin Wushuang could only patiently explain. However, this kind of explanation could not convince such a pure and introverted young girl doctor with a heart as compassionate as a snow lotus. That young girl was in a daze. Suddenly, she thought of something and said, Brother Qin, you are injured. Qin Wushuang said, I will slowly recuperate for a few days, then I will be fine. With Qin Wushuang's foundation, after being baptized by the divine light, his body's functions were very strong, so his recovery ability was also very strong. Because of excessive use of the martial arts, the damage to his primordial spirit, although serious, was not fatal. He only needed to recuperate. After resting in this thatched hut for a night, Qin Wushuang listened to the mountain wind and the sound of the brook. He slept very soundly and sweetly. In this place like a paradise, all the killing and grudges of the outside world slowly fell asleep in the bottom of his heart. The next day, the sun shone through the window early. The sound of birds and the fragrance of flowers woke Qin Wushuang up from his resting state. Qin Wushuang felt his dantian. After a day and night of rest, his injuries were indeed mostly healed. Qin Wushuang was already used to his recovery ability. Since his debut, he had been injured many times, but his body's strong recovery ability allowed his injuries to heal very quickly. Miss, in which direction is the Tortoise King Mountain? After breakfast, Qin Wushuang asked, Brother Qin, are you really not going to take me there? Yes, miss, please believe me. This time, you really don't have to go. The young girl took a deep breath and nodded with some disappointment. Go straight to the mouth of the valley and head southwest. It is a few hundred miles. When you reach the boundary, you will see a shape that looks like a giant tortoise. That is the Tortoise King Mountain. Okay, I will go and take a look. Qin Wushuang smiled at the young girl and said, I have disturbed you these days. Miss, I will definitely repay you for saving me. The young girl shook her head. Brother Qin, I am a doctor. It is my duty to save people. To you, you are saving the dying and healing the injured, but to me, you are saving my life. Miss, I'll take my leave. Qin Wushuang cupped his hands and walked towards the mouth of the valley with large strides. Brother Qin. Seeing Qin Wushuang take a few steps, the young girl hurriedly shouted. Qin Wushuang turned his head. Yes. Brother Qin, my surname is Shui. You can call me Rulin. After the young girl finished speaking, her face flushed red. She ran into the house and closed the door. Leaning against the door, her whole body felt hot. Her throat was dry and astringent, and her chest was rapidly moving up and down. It was obvious that she was very shy. Rulin, the scenery in this empty valley is unique. Hee. Qin Wushuang sighed softly and walked out of the valley. Only then did he spread his wings and quickly flew towards the direction of the Tortoise King Mountain. Even if he did not have wings, Qin Wushuang would not need long to cover a few hundred miles. With this pair of retractable wings, it was extremely easy. After a few ups and downs, he could see the legendary Tortoise King Mountain. This Tortoise King Mountain indeed looked like a huge tortoise crawling there. However, even though it looked like a huge tortoise, the altitude of this mountain was not low. Compared to the surrounding mountain ranges, it had the grandeur of a group of smaller mountains. Looking around, there were actually quite a few villages in the vicinity of the Tortoise King Mountain. However, these villages were all around the Tortoise King Mountain and were very far apart from each other. The distance between each of the villages was a few hundred miles. Qin Wushuang looked down from a high vantage point and had a very good view. Looking at these villages, 8 or 9 out of 10 had already been abandoned and became a land of death. Looking from a high vantage point, it looked very dilapidated and desolate. Qin Wushuang looked at the Tortoise King Mountain again and felt that the atmosphere was very solemn. There was no evil aura at all. He felt very strange. This Tortoise King Mountain is very majestic. It doesn't look like a place with dense evil aura at all. Why are 8 or 9 out of 10 of the surrounding villages abandoned? Could it be that one can't live around such a place? Qin Wushuang retracted his wings and stopped at the foot of the mountain. Having just arrived at an unfamiliar place, Qin Wushuang was not in a hurry to go deeper. Instead, he followed the mountain path and explored upward step by step. After walking for a few sections of the mountain path, a woodcutter suddenly turned in front of him. He was carrying a bundle of firewood on his back and humming a tune. Seeing Qin Wushuang, the woodcutter first stopped and looked at Qin Wushuang with a very guarded gaze. Qin Wushuang said, Brother Woodcutter, which village are you from? The woodcutter subconsciously touched the axe at his waist and stammered. Why do you care which village I'm from? Who are you to dare to come to this Tortoise King Mountain? Are you not afraid of death? You dare to come here to gather firewood. Can't I come here to hunt? Qin Wushuang asked back. The woodcutter was startled and hid at the side of the mountain path. Then you go first. Qin Wushuang did not bat an eyelid and slowly walked upwards. When he arrived in front of the woodcutter raised his arm slightly. Almost at the same time, Qin Wushuang's right elbow lightly bumped into the woodcutter's shoulder. The woodcutter groaned, and the faint blue light in his hand suddenly extinguished. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist, and he took a dozen steps back. He looked at Qin Wushuang warily. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support legal reading. Chapter 480. Qin Wushuang sneered. As expected of the Tortoise King Mountain, even the woodcutter is so powerful. The woodcutter was lightly bumped by Qin Wushuang. Although it was not a solid hit, it still caused the blood in his body to roll. This person clearly did not expect that the person in front of him would be so powerful. Just now, when he raised his arm, he wanted to silently make a small move. He did not expect that his move would be broken by the other party's casual elbow. Who the hell are you? The woodcutter's face was full of hostility. He looked at Qin Wushuang as if his eyes were about to spit fire. Qin Wushuang asked back, "And who are you?" The woodcutter said in an evil tone, "Who I am is none of your business. This Tortoise King Mountain is now our territory. Friend, if you are an outsider, you should know the rules." Your territory? Does this Tortoise King Mountain have an owner? Even if it didn't have one before, it does now. Friend, seeing that your skills are not ordinary, you should be someone with a great background. This Tortoise King Mountain is not a place with good feng shui. You don't have to fight with us over it, right? The woodcutter sounded like he was showing weakness, but how could Qin Wushuang not hear the resentment in his voice? So, this Tortoise King Mountain is your territory? Then I would like to ask, what sect and what sect are you from? Qin Wushuang asked coldly. Friend, aren't you asking too much? The woodcutter's eyes were somewhat ruthless. He suddenly pursed his lips, and a sharp whistle soared into the sky. Calling for friends. Qin Wushuang's face turned cold, but he did not retreat. He grabbed the Overlord breaking formation spear in his hand and strode towards the mountain path, ignoring the woodcutter. The woodcutter below stared at Qin Wushuang's departing figure with vicious eyes. He gritted his teeth and suddenly waved his hands. 2 gloomy rays of light rushed out from his palms and turned into a ball of blue mist, enveloping Qin Wushuang's back. Qin Wushuang seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. Suddenly, he did a somersault and flipped his body in the air. Then he raised his index finger and middle finger and pointed 3 times. The coagulated sword consisted of the Shangyang sword and the Zhongcheng sword. Sword Qi flashed and shot into the woodcutter's chest. The sword Qi shot out and pierced through the woodcutter's chest and back, nailing him to the side of the mountain wall. The woodcutter didn't even have time to react before his life was taken away by the sword Qi that was as fast as a ghost. This coagulated sword was once Qin Wushuang's strongest attack. Now that he had reached the void refinement stage, the power of the coagulated sword was naturally even more impressive. Qin Wushuang had not used this sword art for a long time. This coagulated sword also had many levels. The first stage was the void sword. The second realm was the solid sword. The third stage was the gang sword. For these 3 stages, after Qin Wushuang had entered the perfect stage of the spiritual martial force, he had reached perfection. However, currently, Qin Wushuang was at the refined void martial stage. Naturally, the gang sword stage of this coagulated sword was no longer suitable for Qin Wushuang. It did not match with Qin Wushuang's current stage. And according to Qin Wushuang's memory of the coagulated sword, the 4th stage was the sword soul. Fortunately, regardless of how the stage of the coagulated sword increased, the method and path of training remained the same. It was only a different stage in the same cycle. Thus, there was no need for any tricks to train this 4th stage. He only needed to use the same method and a new stage to train. In the future, he would be able to form the Sword Soul. Once the Sword Soul was formed, one could imagine the increase in attack power. Most importantly, this coagulated sword was extremely beneficial for close combat. Compared to using weapons to kill, this sword technique, performed by using one's fingers, had the advantage of being nimble, free, and quick to change. For any sword technique, the sword was an external object. Even if it was said to be one with the sword, it was only an exaggeration. From a physiological point of view, the fingers were a part of the body and were directly controlled by the spiritual consciousness. And using weapons was an external part of the body. Regardless of how well one trained, how well one cooperated, and how perfect the fusion was, it could not be compared to a part of the body. This was also the biggest advantage of the coagulated sword. Now, Qin Wuxuang had also brought forth new ideas for this coagulated sword. He kept merging the heart and sword intentions of the coagulated sword into actual combat with the weapons. For example, his hegemon breaking formation spear and his violet sun sword had both borrowed the sword intent of the coagulated sword, and the effect was very good. At this moment, Qin Wuxuang had no time to comprehend the mysteries of the moves. He waved the hegemon breaking formation spear in his hand, and his body rose into the air, quickly rushing up the mountain path. The woodcutter's sharp whistle immediately alerted the group of people entrenched on the Tortoise King Mountain. They kept pouring in from all directions. Qin Wuxuang opened his eyes and looked around. He was not worried. It could be seen that although there were many of them, their cultivation was not enough to threaten Qin Wuxuang. At least, these people did not have the ability to fly. In other words, they were at most at the refined void martial stage. For Qin Wuxuang, although he had just entered the refined void martial stage, he was no longer under the control of powerful warriors of the refined void martial stage. Even if he did not use the graceful spiritual bow, he was confident that he could deal with these people. Where did this guy come from? Don't he know that the Tortoise King Mountain has been occupied by us? Since you're here, don't leave. Each of these people scuttled out from different corners of the mountain and rushed towards Qin Wuxuang's direction. Of course, Qin Wuxuang would not rush in a battle. Instead, he hid himself in the dark and observed the background of these people. More than 10 cultivators gathered around the mountain path and looked around. They were obviously looking for Qin Wuxuang's whereabouts. Didn't Eighth Brother warn us just now? Where's Eighth Brother? Oh no, look over there. That's Eighth Brother. Has he been killed? The voices rose and fell one after another. It was a bit noisy. Let's go and inform Big Brother and Second Brother. A powerful enemy must have come. Yes, Third Brother. Let's go and inform Big Brother and Second Brother. Seeing their companion's corpse on the spot, these cultivators were obviously somewhat worried. They did not understand what was going on. This group of people was appointed by their superiors to occupy the Tortoise King Mountain. They were originally unwilling, but they had no choice but to carry out the orders from their superiors. Qin Wuxuang avoided the eyes and ears of these people and shuttled all the way. In a short moment, he arrived at the back of the giant tortoise. This Tortoise King Mountain was indeed like a giant tortoise. Even the top of the mountain was like the back of a tortoise, with pieces of tortoise shell. However, if one did not look at the shape of these pieces from a high place, one would not be able to see them. Just as Qin Wuxuang was walking, suddenly, a figure pierced out from the sky. With a trembling light, a wave of awe-inspiring sword chi slashed at Qin Wuxuang. This sword attack that came out of nowhere was very sudden. Fortunately, Qin Wuxuang was not someone who was easy to deal with. He had been concentrating all his attention. The Overlord breaking formation spear blocked and took advantage of the momentum to move forward. The spear light was urged by Qin Wuxuang and directly shot out from the tip of the spear, thrusting 3 times in a row. These 3 spear lights directly shattered the slanted beam of light that had pierced out. As the ball of light scattered, a figure flew up and circled in the air. Facing the wind, he quickly slashed down with his sword. Qin Wuxuang saw that he could fly so freely in the air and knew that he was undoubtedly a transformation void martial stage expert. He was not afraid at the moment. Pointing the tip of the spear upwards, he continuously stabbed. Two, 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 one spear strike after another, forming an icicle-like sharp attack that greeted the figure in the air. Almost at the same time, Qin Wushuang's left hand shook. The Fury Dragon's soul rolled like a poisonous snake, bringing out streams of black qi that formed circle after circle of ripples that quickly spread to the opposite side. Two hands, two weapons, actually used different moves to attack at the same time. Such an unimaginable attack made the other party dumbstruck. It was simply beyond his imagination. His body rapidly retreated, leaving afterimages in the air as he quickly flew back. This person asked in a hoarse voice, "Who are you?" Qin Wushuang sneered. "And who are you?" This person sneakily attacked him. Obviously, he was not a friend. Under such circumstances, Qin Wushuang would not be polite. Following the direction of the person's retreat, he held the Overlord breaking formation spear horizontally and rushed forward with his whole body. Taking advantage of this speed, he raised the long spear in his hand. Boom. As the long spear moved, the surrounding ground suddenly split on both sides. A whirlwind like a long dragon rolled up in the air and wrapped up all the afterimages of that person with unparalleled speed and momentum. Deep core move. This was Qin Wushuang's self-created spear technique. The third move, deep core. This time, Qin Wushuang did not perform the water attribute or the fire attribute. Instead, he performed the earth attribute. With the mystery of the Earth's pulse, he formed a kind of magnetic field similar to the Earth's vein to control the speed and direction of the opponent's flight, which was a fatal blow. At this time, Qin Wushuang's advantage of being baptized by the divine light suddenly became obvious. The opponent could not believe it. Judging from Qin Wushuang's attack pattern and fighting style, he thought that Qin Wushuang was only at the Voiding Realm. Although the attack of this Voiding Realm was very powerful, that was all. However, Qin Wushuang's endless attack skills made this strong master of the Voiding Realm feel difficult to resist. He quickly retreated, already knowing that things were not going well. Risking being hit by Qin Wushuang's attack, this person quickly soared into the air like a rising dragon. Obviously, he intended to use the advantage of the air to deal a fatal blow to Qin Wushuang. Boom! Qin Wushuang's deep core move hit that person's back. The yellow light suddenly surged, and a huge force directly blasted that person into the sky. That person felt his qi and blood tumbling and almost couldn't control himself. He barely stabilized his body and didn't let himself fall from the air. The attack of the Voiding Realm injured him directly and damaged his vital spirit. This person furiously roared in the air. "Boss, come out quickly. There's a tough one." Qin Wushuang saw clearly that the graceful spiritual bow was already drawn. Whoosh! There was no suspense at all in this arrow as it flew straight into the air. The speed was so fast and the momentum was so strong that the opponent didn't even have time to react. The green light flashed, and there was a burst of explosion in the air. The light scattered and shot in all directions. A rain of blood fell in all directions. That person was completely killed by Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang waved his arm, and the green light returned. That green arrow returned to Qin Wushuang's hand. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.qijian.com to read more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 481. Once the killing began, Qin Wushuang no longer had any doubts. Looking at the experts rushing over from all directions, Qin Wushuang's heart was as calm as still water. Standing at a high point, he fully opened his divine sense and began to count. 1, 2, 3. There were a total of 13 people. These 13 people were the ones who rushed over from all directions to block Qin Wushuang after he killed the woodcutter. However, Qin Wushuang did not choose to fight them head-on. He bypassed their encirclement and entered the interior of the Tortoise King Mountain. At this moment, The experts who were surrounding the periphery obviously realized that the enemy had bypassed them and entered the interior of the Tortoise King Mountain. Therefore, they all cooperated with each other and crazily surrounded the interior. Stop him! Stop him at all costs! A sharp voice came from the interior of the Tortoise King Mountain. The voice was very skillful. As it spoke, there were echoes in all directions. Qin Wushuang could not pinpoint where the voice came from. When the experts on the periphery heard this order, it was as if they had been injected with chicken blood. They immediately went crazy. Like locusts, they rushed over from all directions. Qin Wushuang's expression was grave and stern as he stared at all of this. A thought flashed through his mind, and he seemed to have thought of something. These people looked like ordinary cultivators earlier. Why did they suddenly become like lunatics? It was as if their minds were controlled by someone. Could it be that the person who spoke just now was the one who used the goo poison? Qin Wushuang had some understanding of goo poison. He knew that the person who planted the goo could not only use the goo to poison others, but also use the goo to control others. Poison usually destroyed the physical body. Using the goo to control and manipulate the divine sense was a spiritual manipulation. It was even more cruel than direct poison. Once controlled by the goo, a living person could only be a battle puppet of the person who used the goo. Qin Wushuang recalled the strange behavior of the woodcutter when he first came up the mountain. At that time, the faint blue light in that person's palm was obviously a method to use goo poison. When Qin Wushuang thought of this, his mind suddenly became clear. He knew that the person who was playing tricks on the Tortoise King Mountain must be the person who had spoken just now. Thinking to this point, Qin Wushuang no longer hesitated. With a graceful spiritual bow in his hand, he continuously shot 3 arrows. 3 green lights streaked across the sky and instantly killed the 3 cultivators who were charging from the east. Currently, Qin Wushuang's fusion with a graceful spiritual bow was not at the perfect stage. Not to mention these elite warriors at the refined void martial stage. Qin Wushuang had 100% confidence to kill even a transformation void martial stage warrior. Killing these cultivators at the void refinement realm was naturally a waste of talent. 3 arrows were shot, and 3 people were killed silently. The cultivators in the other 3 directions were completely unaware of it. Qin Wushuang rushed to the east and waved his hand, calling back the 3 dark green arrows. At this moment, the 4 cultivators from the south had already arrived. They surrounded Qin Wushuang. When Qin Wushuang saw their expression, he was even more shocked. The eyes of these 4 people were bloodshot, and their faces seemed to be covered with a thick layer of powder. They were deathly pale like dried corpses that had walked out from the grave and appeared extremely hideous. Qin Wushuang knew that this was the goo poison that was stimulating them and stimulating their combat potential. To these battle puppets controlled by the goo poison, it would be an unwise choice to fight with them. Of course, Qin Wushuang would not make such a mistake. Suddenly, a pair of wings grew out from his back, and he flew into the air. He stabbed 4 times with the He Jimin breaking formation spear in the air and dived down like a goshawk pouncing on its prey. Bang! Bang! 2 consecutive deep core moves had instantly killed 2 of them. The remaining 2 had already attacked from the left and right. Qin Wushuang shifted his feet and suddenly moved horizontally. The immortal Lingyun steps was an exquisite footwork that Qin Wushuang relied heavily on to help him in actual combat. It was extremely mysterious. The 2 people were clearly close to him, but Qin Wushuang pulled horizontally and they immediately fell over. Qin Wushuang put away his weapon and used both his hands to fight with the coagulated sword of the heavenly pulse at the same time. For a moment, his fingers flew and the shadow of his fingers swirled in the air. Sword Qi crisscrossed, specifically attacking the 2 people's weak points. Although the 2 people had weapons in their hands, how could they compare with the coagulated sword of the heavenly pulse in terms of speed and flexibility? 2 against 1. They were caught off guard by Qin Wushuang's attacks. Qin Wushuang's hands cooperated. In a breath, hundreds of sword qi had already surged over like a tide. The two people had no way to dodge and were simultaneously hit by Qin Wushuang's dozens of sword chi at the same time. Only the sound of swords being hit could be heard. The two people fell to the ground and died. In a flash, 7 of the 13 puppet cultivators were destroyed by Qin Wushuang. There were also 3 people from the west and the back who were quickly approaching. Qin Wushuang used the graceful spiritual bow again in a spurt of energy. He didn't even need to aim. Raising the bow and shooting, he directly killed 3 people. Only then did the remaining 3 realize that the situation was not good. However, their consciousness was controlled by the poison. Although they realized the danger, they still rushed over without fear of death. Qin Wushuang did the same. His body flew backwards in the air, and he retrieved the dark green arrow again. Pulling the bow and shooting the arrow, 3 green lights went straight for the remaining 3 puppet cultivators. Boom, boom, boom. Almost at the same time, 3 loud sounds were heard. The targets hit by the green lights were immediately shattered and exploded. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. The 13 refined, void, martial stage cultivators were almost wiped out by Qin Wushuang in an instant. Even Qin Wushuang found it inconceivable. As soon as he activated this killing mode, plus the tyrannical power of the graceful spiritual bow and Qin Wushuang's own powerful combat power, these 13 martial artists that rushed over from all directions did not even have a chance to fight him head-on. Before the graceful spiritual bow, even the refined void martial stage could not withstand a single blow. Qin Wushuang's heart was as calm as still water. Inwardly, there was not the slightest ripple. A wave of familiar murderous intent spread through his spiritual perception. It was even accelerating rapidly. Kill. At this moment, Qin Wushuang only had such a ruthless thought in his head. Qin Wushuang felt somewhat familiar with this feeling. Initially, when the Great Wu had joined hands with the West Chu to attack the Baiyu country, they had killed the martial saint of the Baiyu. Qin Wushuang had also activated this killing mode. In that battle, almost all the elite warriors of the Baiyu had died, and the West Chu had also paid a price for it. Now, Qin Wushuang had activated the killing mode again. Naturally, it was because of the battle at the Wild Flame Cliff. Under the pressure of the 2 perfect Void Martial Stage warriors, Bao Bao and Lone had both fallen off the cliff. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. This had completely stimulated Qin Wushuang's ruthless nature. The names of Yin Qingyun and Wu Lihu had caused Qin Wushuang's anger to erupt completely. Naturally, Qin Wushuang would not show any mercy to these evil people that had used the venomous insects. These people had harmed innocent villagers. It would not be enough to pity them even if they died 100 times. Qin Wushuang raised his voice in an awe-inspiring manner. The person hiding in the mountain, I have cleaned out all your shrimps and crabs for you. The echoes of his voice had penetrated deep into the Tortoise King Mountain. In one of the hidden mountain caves deep inside the Tortoise King Mountain, a man dressed entirely in black and with a layer of black cloth covering his face had eyes like a hawk. Jealousy and viciousness flashed across his eyes as he swore. Trash. A group of trash. 15 people, and you can't even take care of one person? He looked around and looked at this mountain cave that he could not even sleep peacefully. He looked at the treasures sealed around this mountain cave. He gnashed his teeth with hatred. He was not reconciled. He was truly not reconciled. When he thought here, a trace of determination flashed across this person's eyes. He grabbed a black staff next to him and muttered to himself, I will go out and kill this guy first, then I will make plans. This mountain cave is mine. All the treasures are mine. No one wants to take it away. Whoever wants to take it away must die. The tone of this man in black was almost crazy. If someone were to see him now, they would definitely think that this person was a madman. Although this was what he thought, he stopped after taking a few steps. He could not help but hesitate. This person killed my puppets so easily. He is at least an expert of the profound void martial stage. If I go out rashly, it will not help at all. What he thought here, he hesitated again. This Tortoise King Mountain has a good name. Do you really want to be a coward and hide your head in the Tortoise King Mountain and not come out? The black-robed man was indifferent to all the curses and scoldings coming from outside. He did not care about his reputation. He did not care about the curses of his enemies. However, he cared about the fact that this mountain cave could not be exposed in front of others. He had controlled so many puppets and so many hired thugs. He had created so many terrifying incidents in the Tortoise King Mountain. He even did not hesitate to poison the surrounding villages and turn them into a land of death. There was only one starting point, and that was to make sure that the Tortoise King Mountain became his private territory. When outsiders thought of this place, they would feel fear and would not dare to come near. The quieter and more desolate the Tortoise King Mountain was, the more advantageous it would be for his actions. However, the fortune in his life was not destined to be his territory. Even if he wanted to take it for himself, it was impossible. Outside, Qin Wushuang sneered again. "If you don't come out, do you think I won't be able to find you?" The man in black was shocked. If it is really an expert of the profound void martial stage, or even stronger experts passing by, it is not impossible to find the cave in the heart of the mountain. If the other party uses his divine sense to search, even if he can't find it in a day or two, he will definitely find some clues after 10 days or half a month. The man in black was in a mess. If this mountain cave was found by the other party, it meant that they would have to fight at close range. The man in black was unwilling to give up. There were many good things sealed in this cave. This was obviously a place of hidden treasures. A place of hidden treasures in the heart of the mountain. He had studied here for so many years, but he still could not find a way to break these seals. Therefore, he could only stare at these treasures that made him drool. He could see them, but could not get them. This kind of pain could be imagined. If I can't get them, I will definitely not let others get them. If he wants to snatch these treasures from me, he will have to step on my dead body. Otherwise, he will die. The man in black hesitated for a moment. Then his mind became firm. He decided that he would not go anywhere. He would stay here and wait for the enemy to come. He would wait for the other party to find this place. Then he would plot against him. At least, he was very familiar with the winding terrain of this mountain cave. He had a very superior geographical advantage. Waiting for the enemy to come, the chances were very high. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 482. Qin Wushuang opened his consciousness and sensed for a moment. He realized that the other party was probably hiding on purpose. Qin Wushuang thought carefully. The other party couldn't hide, so he must be trying to use the geographical advantage to sneak attack me. This person's methods may not be strong, but I need to be careful of his poison. With this layer of mental preparation, Qin Wushuang started to look around. After observing for a while, Qin Wushuang didn't find any clues. Qin Wushuang spread his wings and flew into the air, circling around the Tortoise King Mountain. His consciousness passed through the mountain and kept exploring. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang's consciousness moved. He landed on a large mountain rock. He looked down at the steep cliff below. He was thinking. This was because the divine sense in his body had suddenly sensed a very familiar feeling. It was a magical feeling similar to resonance. It was strange, but when this feeling came, it made all the blood in Qin Wushuang's body boil. The primordial spirit in his body also started to have an indescribable fluctuation. It was a very familiar feeling. Qin Wushuang only felt that he seemed to have grasped a little clue. However, this clue didn't become clear in a short time, making him feel like he was neither close nor far. He knew that all of this must be related to the terrain of the Tortoise King Mountain. Qin Wushuang sat quietly and observed the surrounding terrain. He didn't want to miss any clues. He was serious and focused. This feeling is so familiar, like déjà vu. What could it be? Qin Wushuang started to recall his thoughts. He started to organize all his experiences since he had stepped onto the path of martial arts. When he organized the Green Jade Mountain at the border of the Great Luo Empire and the Heavenly Lake Empire, Qin Wushuang's heart suddenly shook. The green jade mountain, that cave, that big pit, and that experience of narrowly escaping death. Then his consciousness followed the seven deadly arrays formation to the second layer, which was the second circle of the formation in the depths of the Great Song Mountain. Then it was the third circle of the Red Dragon Empire. The terrain of each ring had some similar places. Although the topography was not exactly the same, Qin Wushuang had a good understanding of the seven deadly arrays formation after experiencing the three rings of the seven deadly arrays formation. Could it be that this Tortoise King Mountain is the fourth part of the seven deadly arrays formation? When Qin Wushuang thought of this, he felt the blood in his body surge. If that was the case, it would be too much of coincidence. Initially, that seven deadly arrays formation was a miraculous fortune. The Tianxian land is so vast, yet it fell into my hands. This proves that I am fated with this array formation. If that's the case, it's not entirely impossible that this Tortoise King Mountain is the fourth ring of the formation and I just happen to run into it. Thinking of this, Qin Wushuang had no more doubts. He began to search for the entrance. With this idea in mind, Qin Wushuang's search was no longer a blind search without a motive, but a very targeted exploration. Each of the first three rings of the seven deadly arrays formation had a floating entrance. These entrances were very narrow and hidden, making them very difficult to find. As for the other entrance, one would need to go through 3 or 4 layers of mechanisms to find it. For example, the second ring of the Great Song Mountain. The first time Qin Wushuang entered it, it was through the cave in the precipitous cliff of the second ring. However, in fact, there was an entrance at the foot of the mountain that could be entered through the mechanism. Now, Qin Wushuang had already told his father about the mechanism at the entrance of the Great Song Mountain. If this Tortoise King Mountain is truly the fourth ring, then I need to find the entrance to the fourth ring. It's not suitable to enter from the side of the precipice. I can only go through the entrance with the mechanism. If I go through that entrance, it will be more convenient. If there is someone inside the cave, it will be less likely to raise their guard. Qin Wushuang knew that even if this was the fourth ring of the seven deadly arrays formation, even if someone had already found this cave, he was not worried at all. It was because the setup of this formation was very ingenious. Without the fortuitous encounter of the first and second rings, it would be useless to enter any of the other rings alone. It would be impossible to break the defenses of a single ring, and it would be impossible to activate the formation. Only Qin Wushuang, who had been baptized by the divine power of the first and second rings, was qualified to activate this formation. Of course, even if it was Qin Wushuang, he could only enter the fourth ring at most at this time. This was because the foundation for activating the fourth ring was the Voiding Realm, and Qin Wushuang's cultivation was also at the Voiding Realm. Therefore, if Qin Wushuang found the cave in the fifth ring now, he would be at his wit's end. With his strength, he would not be able to activate any of the restrictions in the fifth ring. According to his previous experience of the third ring, the entrance to the mechanism was usually at the foot of the mountain. This entrance was usually very hidden. Following this train of thought, Qin Wushuang had a clue and began to search at the foot of the Tortoise King Mountain. Hard work paid off. That evening, Qin Wushuang found a very suspicious clue. Following this clue, Qin Wushuang followed up layer by layer. As expected, it was full of twists and turns. After passing through layers of obstacles, Qin Wushuang began to believe in his own premonition. Sure enough, it's a coincidence. It seems that this Tortoise King Mountain is most likely the location of the fourth ring of the formation. Qin Wushuang's heartbeat could not help but accelerate. Finally, he encountered the first mechanism. The settings of these mechanisms were exactly the same, and the methods used were completely the same. However, the difficulty of the mechanism increased with the strength of the person who owned the formation. The requirement of the fourth ring was the Voiding Realm, so the difficulty of the mechanism could only be successfully activated by the Voiding Realm. Qin Wushuang had experience in activating mechanisms, so this time it was naturally easy for him. After activating the first mechanism, Qin Wushuang no longer had any doubts in his heart. He knew that this Tortoise King Mountain was without a doubt the fourth ring of the seven deadly arrays formation. Just as the master of the formation said, even if I have the seven deadly arrays formation, I still have to be careful at every step. This was because even though every part of the formation was linked to each other, it was also an individual that opposed each other. These individuals can all be discovered by others. Now, the cave on the fourth layer should have been discovered by others. It's very dangerous. As Qin Wushuang thought so, he secretly warned himself that he had to be careful. However, he thought, that person must have entered the interior of the cave and seen the scale of the formation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have hidden himself all this time. He must have seen the sealed treasure in the fourth ring of the formation and refused to leave. Qin Wushuang's speculation was also reasonable. After passing the first mechanism, the next step was very easy. Qin Wushuang almost followed the vine to the melon. Soon, he reached the second mechanism and unlocked it. After unlocking the two mechanisms, Qin Wushuang also became cautious. He knew that after passing the second mechanism, he would have entered the hinterland of the mountain. He was also one step closer to the core area of the cave. As long as he reached the third mechanism, it meant that he would directly face the core area of the formation. The gap between them was the third mechanism. Along the way, Qin Wushuang did not make a single sound. Finally, he reached the third mechanism. Listening carefully, Qin Wushuang knew that as long as this mechanism was unlocked, it meant that he had also entered the core area of the formation. If that person was near the mechanism, it meant that they would meet on a narrow path. However, according to Qin Wushuang's speculation, even if that person was in the cave, he definitely didn't know about this mechanism, because only when the restriction in the formation was unlocked could he know the location of the mechanism from the restriction message. In all likelihood, that person was able to reach this cave, must have accidentally passed by the cave entrance facing the cliff. If this person wanted to take defensive measures, he must be guarding at that cave entrance. That exit and the mechanism's exit were the two ends of the entire formation. The distance between them was the farthest. In other words, if that person was really guarding at the entrance of the cliff, then when he unlocked this mechanism, the other party would definitely not be aware of it. Qin Wushuang had already overcome some of his previous nervousness. According to his repeated deductions, based on his deduction, he was sure that if he was in this cave, under the situation where he didn't know the inside story and knew that an outsider was about to invade, he would definitely guard at the cave entrance that might be discovered. And it was impossible for him to guard at the unknown location of the mechanism. In other words, although it sounded very dangerous, in reality, Qin Wushuang was the furthest away from danger when he entered from here. Once Qin Wushuang entered the formation, Qin Wushuang, who was used to the seven deadly arrays formation, didn't need to worry about the other party having the advantage of the geographical location. Qin Wushuang held the graceful spiritual bow lightly and didn't release it. He silently chanted the incantation and slowly unlocked the mechanism with one hand. He tried his best to suppress all the energy fluctuations and didn't let the other party wake up. When the mechanism was completely unlocked, Qin Wushuang quickly jumped inside. Like a ghost, he flashed inside. At the same time, his heart relaxed. After entering the cave, his situation would be slightly more advantageous. As expected by Qin Wushuang, the layout of the cave formation in this ring was not much different from the previous three rings. It was especially similar to the third ring. Qin Wushuang speculated the direction of the terrain and slowly extended his consciousness, slowly starting to search. Everything was within Qin Wushuang's calculations. When his consciousness had just approached the cave entrance at the edge of the cliff, that person's consciousness also moved. Qin Wushuang immediately retracted his consciousness. Of course, he also knew that the other party wouldn't suspect that he had already entered the cave. As expected, the black-clothed person's consciousness throbbed. He tightly gripped the black cane in his hand and attached his body to the stone wall behind the entrance. On top of the black cane, there was a terrifying skull-like shape. All the holes in the skull were black and had an extremely demonic aura, as if there were endless evil hidden inside. This person is indeed powerful. The black-clothed person's thoughts were somewhat complicated. So fast, his consciousness has already reached here. If he discovers this cave entrance, he will definitely come here. As long as he gets close to the cave, I will launch a fatal attack. Thinking of this, the black-clothed person's grip on the black cane tightened. Even his palms were full of sweat. Now that all his puppet cultivators had been destroyed, this made him feel somewhat lacking in confidence. Entrusted by a friend, I pushed a book. Talisman Seals the World, book number 186, for 851. Introduction. On the heavenly moat continent, where the flames of war raged, there are 19 ancient talismans scattered. Each talisman represents the absolute power of its own domain and is related to the mysterious factor of ascension to the immortal realm. Whoever can hold these talismans will become the strongest person in the world. 19 talismans with a single hand, heaven and earth will be turned upside down. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 483. However, this black-clothed man would never have imagined that the opponent he feared had already entered the cave and was lying in ambush behind him, ready to launch a fatal attack at any time. Qin Wushuang approached step by step. According to his estimation, this person's cultivation should be at least at the transformation void martial stage. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to control so many puppet experts. Qin Wushuang was very clear about the situation at the entrance of the cave. He knew that in this battle, it would be impossible for a prolonged battle to occur. Once a prolonged battle occurred, the situation would not necessarily be in his favor. Therefore, what he pursued was a one-hit kill. If he wanted a one-hit kill, he could only rely on the graceful spiritual bow. Now, he could only use the graceful spiritual bow to ensure that he could kill his opponent in one strike in this narrow cave. However, Qin Wushuang was not without any trump cards. It could almost be said that ever since he entered this cave, the geographical advantage of this cave had been completely transferred from the opponent's hands to Qin Wushuang's hands. Previously, Qin Wushuang did not enter the hinterland. That black-clothed man naturally had the geographical advantage in the cave. But now, this cave no longer had any advantages to speak of for that black-clothed man. On the contrary, this cave would become the black-clothed man's restraint. However, that black-clothed man knew nothing about all of this. Qin Wushuang slowly approached the entrance of the cave. After going around a few winding bends, Qin Wushuang could almost feel the dim light coming from the entrance of the cave. Qin Wushuang knew that he could not go any further. If he went any further, it was very likely that he would attract the opponent's attention. In this battle, he needed to take the opponent by surprise. Thinking of this, Qin Wushuang's gaze stopped at an armor hanging on the opposite mountain wall. This armor was emitting a deep blue light, giving people a very mysterious and profound feeling. Qin Wushuang's heart was moved, and he had an idea. He waved his hand, and the Fury Dragon's soul appeared in his hand. It coiled over like a viper and directly locked onto the blue armor. With a gentle push, his divine power was activated and the armor was directly pulled out from the mountain wall. The defensive walls and restrictions on the outside were activated at the same time. As soon as the restriction was broken, the surrounding magnetic field immediately emitted a burst of beep, 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 beep. When the armor fell to the ground, Qin Wushuang didn't pick it up. Instead, he let the armor fall to the ground. On the other hand, Qin Wushuang flashed into the darkness with a graceful spiritual bow in his hand. 3 jade-green arrows were knocked on top of it, ready for battle. The sound of the explosion had obviously alarmed the man in black. The black-clothed man was stunned. His body was like a nimble cat. He jumped down from the mountain wall and quickly scuttled inside. As soon as he turned the corner, he saw the blue armor fall to the ground, emitting a dazzling blue light. This kind of psychedelic color emitted a mellow and deep power, showing that this armor was different from the rest. The black-clothed man's eyes immediately revealed a hint of greed. This armor made his heart palpitate. However, it was only at this moment that he was moved. The armor had always been embedded in the mountain wall and sealed with restrictions. He had thought of countless methods, but he was unable to take it down. Now it suddenly fell in the passage. This unforeseen event obviously made the black-clothed man feel abnormally shocked. His pupils contracted. Just as he was hesitating, a green light flashed in front of his eyes. Unexpectedly, a green divine light struck toward him like lightning. The black-clothed man was dumbstruck. He lifted the black cane in his hand, wanting to use it to block. It could be said that this was the only choice he had. The mountain path was so narrow that he couldn't push it left or right. If he retreated, the speed of pushing it back couldn't be faster than the speed of this green light attack. Therefore, his choice to block was the wisest and only choice. He lifted the cane, and a black fog spurted out from it, forming a black fog barrier. It rushed toward the green light. Qin Wushuang's mouth revealed a trace of a happy smile. He knew that the other party was going to die. Swoosh, swoosh. The two arrows behind him were shot out. The two arrows shot out at the same time, bringing with them a domineering force that directly dispersed the black fog. With a boom, the entire mountain cave almost trembled. At the same time, the green jade arrows hit the black-clothed man's body and nailed him to the mountain wall. This time, Qin Wushuang's archery didn't use that kind of explosive attack wave. Instead, he used a penetrating shot with extremely strong penetrating power. The three green lights rushed into the black-clothed man's body. The powerful force of impact didn't even give the black-clothed man time to make a sound as he fell onto the mountain wall in despair. For an opponent who was hit by the graceful spiritual bow, no matter how strong his cultivation was, it was impossible for him to survive. Naturally, this black-clothed man was no exception. He fell to the ground with a loud bang. His entire body had already softened into a pile of mud. He had been dead for a long time. Qin Wushuang let out a sigh of relief and walked out of the darkness. He slowly walked to the front of the black-clothed man. He didn't touch the black-clothed man's body. Instead, he retrieved the three green jade arrows and then put away the graceful spiritual bow. After finishing all of this, Qin Wushuang used the Fury Dragon Soul to wrap the black-clothed man's body and directly dragged it into the cave. Looking at the black-clothed man's appearance, as well as his extremely evil-looking cane, Qin Wushuang speculated that this person should be the master of the goo poison. He should also be the master of those puppet cultivators. This kind of cultivator who used goo poison. Even if he was dead, he still couldn't let his guard down, because a small detail on his body could cost him his life. Qin Wushuang used the Fury Dragon Soul to tear apart this person's clothes. Sure enough, this person's outer clothes were filled with mechanisms. Other than all kinds of strange talismans, there were also all kinds of grotesquely shaped goo worms, especially a small black cauldron, which was filled with this kind of poisonous substance. Qin Wushuang only felt his scalp go numb. Looking at this black-clothed man, he spat out a mouthful of saliva. He also caught a glimpse of a storage ring on this person's finger. Qin Wushuang used the Fury Dragon Soul to hook the storage ring off. Qin Wushuang was still very cautious. He didn't touch the ring with his hand. Instead, he made a few hand seals in the air and opened the space of the ring. This black-clothed man really had a lot of storage. Inside the ring, there were all kinds of collections. Qin Wushuang counted them. Crystal stones and other things were still fine. Qin Wushuang didn't lack these things at the moment. What made Qin Wushuang the most excited was a secret manual of the Divine Goose Secret Path. Qin Wushuang opened the Divine Goose Secret Path, flipped through it for a moment, and fell into deep thought. Inside, the first chapter was the general outline, discussing the question of whether this goo technique was good or evil. This Divine Goose Secret Path said that the goo technique was only one of the many magical abilities. It was just that the goo technique was mysterious, secretive, and unknown to others. Therefore, it was very mysterious and was given a legendary color. Over time, it was easily passed down as an evil technique. This divine goo secret path believed that if all the magical abilities in the world fell into the hands of evil people, no matter how righteous they were all evil techniques. And if evil magical abilities fell into the hands of righteous people, they could also become righteous means. Naturally, this point of view coincided with Qin Wushuang's understanding. Qin Wushuang had always advocated that there was no strong or weak skill, but there was a high or low realm. Instantly, Qin Wushuang felt a strong sense of resonance when he read this general outline. After flipping through it for a while, the various goo techniques that were talked about were even more magical, making Qin Wushuang greatly convinced. At this moment, Qin Wushuang was naturally not in the mood to read it carefully. Without hesitation, he threw the divine goo secret path into his storage ring. As for the other goo poisons and poisonous insects of the black-clothed man, as well as some strange talismans, although Qin Wushuang felt that they were useless, he still took them all. He threw all of them into the storage ring of the black-clothed man, and then put the entire storage ring into his storage ring. After doing all this, Qin Wushuang rolled up the black-clothed man's body, walked directly to the entrance of the cave, and threw it down the bottomless abyss. This was the fourth ring of the 7 deadly arrays formation in Qin Wushuang's territory. Naturally, he would not allow a corpse to pollute his territory here. Qin Wushuang circled the entrance of the cave a few more times. After confirming that there was no threat around, he began to study the specific structure of the fourth ring. Soon, Qin Wushuang locked onto the location of the formation eye. It was the same as the previous formation eyes. This was also a large stone that formed a teleportation formation at both ends. With previous experience, Qin Wushuang found the formation eye of the formation very easily. Qin Wushuang found the formation eye of the formation and poured in his spiritual qi. Indeed, a wave of spiritual light surged and a voice slowly sounded. It was that somewhat aged voice from before. Lucky one, you finally reached the fourth ring. It means that now, you are already an elite warrior at the refined Void Martial stage. As an elite warrior at the refined Void Martial stage, you are not a powerful existence in the Xianyuan Mound. Thus, you must have some capital to survive in the Xianyuan Mound. In the cave, I also left a few things for you. These things are not enough for you to be invincible in the Xianyuan Mound. However, they can help you accumulate enough capital to face the possible dangers. Among them, the first one is an azure armor. This armor is the work of a master. Although it cannot be compared to a divine weapon, it is the strongest defense beneath the supreme Tao stage. And this armor can travel in water and fire. It can connect the 5 elements and is extremely miraculous. Qin Wushuang was moved when he heard this. To him, having such armor was definitely a great piece of news. With this armor, he would not have been in such an embarrassing state if he had been at the Wild Flame Cliff. Even if that Wu Lihu had shot a few arrows at him, he would not have to worry about losing his life. What he thought here, Qin Wushuang could not help but feel somewhat sour. He thought about Bao Bao and Lone's uncertain life and death situation, and this azure armor. His heart ached endlessly. If I had entered the fourth ring earlier, how could something have happened to Bao Bao and Lone during that battle at the Wild Flame Cliff? Just as he was pondering, the voice continued. The second treasure is a sealed scroll. Do not underestimate this sealed scroll. There were a total of 12 sealing scrolls, each of which had a spirit beast puppet sealed within. Almost all of these spirit beasts were captured from the wildlands, trained, refined, and sealed. Without emotions, once they are unsealed, they will become a pure battle tool. However, since these spiritual beast puppets are sealed, they do not know how to train. Thus, after the battle, they cannot cultivate or replenish the consumed spiritual qi. Thus, once their spiritual qi is exhausted, their combat power will disappear completely, and they will become trash. 12 Sealed Scrolls. When Qin Wushuang heard this, his heartbeat could not help but speed up. I recommend my friend's Eastern fantasy novel, Zawa. Everyone, go and collect it. Once you fatten it up, you can slaughter it. Book number 1877762 must be collected. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 484. Clearly, that voice had given Qin Wushuang some time to digest the information. When Qin Wushuang had slowly calmed down, he continued to speak with a smile. These 12 sealed scrolls are different than the purple flame electric beast. The purple flame electric beast is a true spiritual beast with flesh and blood. He is not a fighting machine. However, the spiritual beasts inside these 12 sealed scrolls will not form any emotions with you. They are purely fighting machines. Additionally, their strength far surpasses that of the purple flame electric beast. Most of them are spiritual beasts from the heavenly fire southern border. A few of them came from the endless eastern sea. Among them, the weakest one possesses the combat power of the transformation void martial stage. And the strongest, are invincible beneath the supreme Tao stage. Invincible beneath the supreme Tao stage. These 6 words stunned Qin Wushuang instantly. If it were in the past, Qin Wushuang would not have any idea. However, now he had a clearer understanding of the training system and knew what it meant to be beneath the supreme Tao stage. In the Tianxian land, perhaps there were many elite warriors of the supreme Tao stage. However, there would never be a situation where the supreme Tao stage was as common as dogs, and the exquisite mysterious boundary stage was everywhere. In other words, invincible beneath the supreme Tao stage were at least at the half-god level. Beneath the supreme Tao stage was the exquisite mysterious boundary stage. In the Xianyuan Mound, not many people possessed such strength. For example, the 2 Tao warriors of the heavenly Luo Taoist sect, or Mu Rong Qianji, the owner of the floating snow house he had met a few days ago. Invincible beneath the supreme Tao stage. Qin Wushuang repeated these words over and over again. Clearly, he could not calm down inwardly. If that's the case, then at this Xianyuan Mound, I will not fear the endless pursuit from the heavenly Luo Taoist sect. And for Wu Lihu and Yin Qingyun, I will not allow them to be free for too long. Just as Qin Wushuang's mind was rippling, that voice poured a bucket of cold water over him. Young man, don't be happy too early. These 12 sealed scrolls were not something that could be summoned, just because one wanted to summon them. You must fulfill certain conditions. If you are only at the void refining stage now, you can only summon 2 sealed spiritual beasts at the void transformation stage and the void transformation stage at most. If you enter the transformation void martial stage, you can summon sealed spiritual beasts at the perfect void martial stage. All in all, you can only summon sealed spirit beasts that are 2 realms higher than you. And that's because you've been baptized by my divine power. If the 12 sealing scrolls were to fall into the hands of others, they could only summon spirit beasts of the same level as themselves at most. This setup was also to protect the owner of the 7 deadly arrays formation to the greatest extent. Just in case these 12 sealed scrolls fall into the hands of others, it can weaken their effects. Qin Wushuang naturally understood this. If it was a summon of the same level, it would at most summon a helper of the same level. It might be able to change the situation of a battle, but it wouldn't be of much significance. But in his hands, he was able to summon across levels, and 2 levels at that. The significance of this was completely different. Thinking of this, Qin Wushuang was not depressed. These 12 sealing scrolls are arranged according to the 12 zodiac signs. These sealed battle beasts are the Sky Pilfered Mole, Purple Pupil Golden Bull, Burning Sky Explosive Tiger, Moon Palace Jade Hare, Swallowing Sky Lion Dragon, Dark Mysterious Snake, One-Horned Mystical Horse, Rending Earth Devil Goat, Great Desolate Giant Monkey, Hissing Sky Phoenix, Illusionary Cloud Divine Hound, and pure ultra-precious pig. In total, there are 12 sealed battle beasts. 2 at the transformation void martial stage, 3 at the profound void martial stage, 3 at the perfect void martial stage, 2 at the profound mysterious stage, and 2 at the common mysterious stage. As for the level of these 12 spiritual beasts, you will know after you summon them. As long as they don't fight, their spiritual chi will not be consumed. Remember, after the battle, you must summon them back into the sealing scrolls as fast as possible. Only this way, you can prolong their consumption to the greatest extent. I will repeat, these sealed spiritual beasts are only tools for battle. They will not develop any emotions with their masters. When necessary, they will be used as puppets to protect their masters. If you cannot see through this point, most likely this sealing scrolls will bring you bad luck. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang felt apprehensive. He nodded silently and remembered these words. This is the second treasure. Perhaps you will feel somewhat disappointed because these 12 sealing scrolls are consumable goods. They cannot be summoned at any time, nor are they inexhaustible. However, the third treasure I'm giving you now is a supplement to the second treasure. And this supplement is perfect. This treasure is called the Genuine Spirit Post. What is the Genuine Spirit Post? To put it bluntly, it is a pen. This pen is not an ordinary object. It is a genuine spirit pen used to draw talismans and to inject spiritual chi. With this divine pen, you will have enough spiritual power. As long as you have enough spiritual chi, you can provide spiritual chi to those 12 sealing scrolls at any time. By injecting spiritual chi, those sealed battle beasts can receive spiritual chi and maintain an endless supply of combat power. Of course, for the 12 sealing scrolls and the 12 sealed spiritual beasts, the amount of spiritual chi needed is astonishing. The amount of crystal stones needed is also enormous. Qin Wushuang knew that crystal stones had many uses and many types. However, only those crystal stones could be used for training, to make spiritual talismans, and to build all kinds of formations. However, Qin Wushuang had acquired some from the 100-Leaf Qin clan. He had also acquired some from killing General Manager Su. He had acquired some from killing that man in black a moment ago. Among these crystal stones, there are many crystal stones that should provide some necessary supplements. Only, Qin Wushuang had no idea how many crystal stones were needed for those sealing scrolls. However, with this genuine spirit post, naturally, Qin Wushuang would deliberately collect more crystal stones to provide energy support for those sealing scrolls. Of course, Qin Wushuang also knew that although the crystal stones were used for a wide range of training methods, not all crystal stones could be absorbed directly. It was because there were large amounts of impurities inside the crystal stones. If these impurities could not be purified and were absorbed directly into one's body, it would not help to increase one's strength. It might even have an adverse effect. However, to make spiritual talismans and formations, the requirement of these crystal stones would be slightly higher. If one were to use them for training, one would either have to purify the crystal stones or use the pure crystal stones. Only then would it be suitable for training. At least in the Tianxian land, although it was common to use crystal stones to train, it was definitely not the mainstream training method. It was because in the natural world, there were many sources to absorb spiritual chi. The most important was to communicate with nature to increase one's primordial spirit. A material source of spiritual chi, such as crystal stones, was not the most ideal training method. Qin Wushuang waited for a moment, and that voice said, "Lucky one, these 3 gifts are enough for you to solve many problems in the Xianyuan Mount. As long as your luck is not too bad, I believe that you can handle most situations with ease." Naturally, the 4th gift is the same as the 3rd circle. It's a map. However, this map is not the map of the Xianyuan Mount. It's the map of the Endless Eastern Sea. Endless Eastern Sea? Qin Wushuang was stunned inwardly. Why would it provide a map of the Endless Eastern Sea? Could it be that the 5th circle of this 7 deadly formation arrays is at the Endless Eastern Sea? Indeed, that voice immediately gave him the answer. Lucky one, perhaps you have already guessed it. That's right, the fifth circle of this seven deadly formation arrays is at the endless eastern sea. That underwater world is full of miraculous opportunities. To put it bluntly, perhaps the strength of the endless eastern sea might not be stronger than the Xian Yuan Mount. However, the situation at the endless eastern sea is far more chaotic and desperate than the Xian Yuan Mount. It's the best training stage for martial artists. Of course, you must remember that I have my reasons for setting up this seven deadly formation arrays. In the end, you will understand my original intention. Remember, to enter the fifth circle from the fourth circle, you need to enter the profound void martial stage to activate the formation. Starting from the third circle, this seven deadly formation arrays had a two-way transportation formation. It meant that at this moment, if Qin Wushuang wanted to return to the human countries, he only needed to pass through this formation. As soon as the formation was activated, he could return to the human countries in the third circle at the Red Dragon Empire's Divine Dragon territory. Then, through the third circle, he could return to the second circle at the Great Song Mountain. In other words, Qin Wushuang could return to the Eastwood Qin clan quickly through the formation. To Qin Wushuang, this was definitely good news. All right, young man, don't think about the fifth circle. Enjoy this world of the Xian Yuan Mount. I believe that you will certainly broaden your horizons. Ha ha ha. With my seven deadly formation arrays, if you still cannot stand out in the Tian Xian land, lucky one, I can only say that you should not let me down. After he had finished speaking, this voice slowly withdrew and became silent. Apparently, all the fortuitous opportunities from this fourth circle had come to an end. Currently, Qin Wushuang was still somewhat excited. Clearly, the gains from this fourth circle had surpassed his imagination, especially those 12 sealed scrolls. It made Qin Wushuang feel that he had grasped an extremely powerful trump card. This time, Qin Wushuang did not feel as calm as he did at the third circle. Compared to when he had opened the third circle, the joy he felt was much weaker. Of course, all of this was because Bao Bao and Lone had been separated. Deep in his heart, he was unwilling to admit that Bao Bao and Lone had died. However, when he thought about this matter, he felt a piercing pain in his heart. Standing up from that formation eye, Qin Wushuang slowly regained his calmness. He sat on the side and calmed his mind. He planned to return to that wild flame cliff to see what had happened. However, before this, he decided to take a look at the storage bag that Qin Shixuan had given him solemnly. He wanted to see what kind of good things were inside. After he opened that storage bag, indeed, it was filled with a dazzling lineup of items. The first thing that entered his eyes was a large pile of crystal stones. These crystal stones contained an extremely rich energy and emitted strong fluctuations. Apparently, they were extremely high-quality crystal stones. These crystal stones had energized Qin Wushuang's mind. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chijian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 485. Qin Wushuang counted and found that there were at least hundreds of such crystal stones. Qin Wushuang was overjoyed inwardly. This is like a drowsy person meeting a pillow. These crystal stones can replenish the spiritual beast for the 12 sealed scrolls. With these crystal stones, it should not be a problem to replenish one round, right? Besides those crystal stones, there were a few pieces of jet black metal. This metal appeared to be jet black and shiny and appeared to be very special. Qin Wushuang weighed it with his hand and found that it was extremely heavy. Qin Wushuang knew that this should be the special metal material that Senior Qin Shixuan had mentioned. Besides these two pieces of metal material, there were a few pieces of jade-like green jade that were sparkling and translucent. When one held this green jade in his hand, it made one feel relaxed and relaxed. Qin Wushuang frowned slightly. This green jade is not ordinary. What kind of treasure is it? Although he did not know what it was, Qin Wushuang knew that these palm-sized pieces of green jade were not ordinary things. Immediately, he put down that green jade. The entire storage pouch was filled with these things. Altogether, there were about 100 or 200 pieces. Although Qin Wushuang did not know the use of these things, he knew that they were priceless. Or else, that heavenly punishing villa would not have chased after Senior Qin Shishuan hysterically. Immediately, he put that storage pouch into his storage ring. He decided to return to the Bowl Valley to take a look. Then, he would find the way out and return to the Wild Flame Cliff. After he had put everything away, Qin Wushuang inspected the surrounding area of the formation. After confirming that there were no traces of anyone coming here, he went to the entrance at the edge of the cliff and completely blocked the entrance so that no one would be able to see any traces from the outside. Only then did he return to the cave. After returning, Qin Wushuang put on that azure blue armor and took off his original inner armor. Then, he took the other 3 items, including the 12 sealed scrolls, the genuine spiritual post, and a map of the endless eastern sea from a seal. After doing all this, Qin Wushuang retraced his steps. After passing through numerous traps, he arrived at the exit at the foot of the mountain. Qin Wushuang returned to the Tortoise King Mountain and cleaned up the area around the mountain. He cleaned up all the corpses and cleaned up the scene until there was no trace left. Only then did Qin Wushuang return from the Tortoise King Mountain. He flew in the direction of Bowl Valley. From the time Qin Wushuang left Bowl Valley to the time he returned, it had only been a day and a night. To Qin Wushuang, a few hundred miles was simply a short time. Very soon, Qin Wushuang landed outside Bowl Valley. In order not to alarm the mountain folks, Qin Wushuang decided to walk into the valley. By the time they reached the valley, it was already the evening of the second day. From afar, Qin Wushuang saw Shui Rulin's thatched hut with smoke rising in spirals. It made Qin Wushuang feel a trace of warmth. Walking quickly to that thatched hut, Qin Wushuang suddenly felt a sense of danger and stopped his footsteps. Just as he was concentrating, he suddenly saw the door was pushed open and a person walked out from the house. This person was a burly man with a curly beard. With a rough appearance, he held a roasted chicken in his hand and was eating it in big bites. While he was eating, he swore, "Mother ******, I didn't expect such a beautiful girl to exist in this rural place where even birds don't shit. TSK, I just want her." As he spoke, he angrily spat out a mouthful of bones. Unfortunately, such a good cabbage has been eaten by a pig. Mother *****, it's okay if he doesn't get the soup, but he still wants me to guard the door for him. Damn it. While he was talking, the man suddenly raised his head and saw Qin Wushuang staring at him with a gaze that could kill 10 cows. His whole body trembled, and the roasted chicken in his hand fell out of shock. His hand grabbed a ghost head knife. "Hey, who the F*** are you? Sneaking around. What do you want to do here?" Qin Wushuang didn't answer at all. His figure is like a breeze. With a flash, he floated in front of the man. The man raised his hand and chopped at him. Qin Wushuang stepped on the immortal Lingyun steps and easily dissolved the knife. With a lift of his finger, the middle rushing sword of the coagulated sword shot out. The man's wrist shook and was hit by the sword light. The ghost head knife just happened to fall and chopped at his foot. The man hugged his foot in pain and screamed. "Old Ray, what the F*** are you screaming for?" A voice in the room shouted angrily. Qin Wushuang raised his arm and sealed all the acupuncture points of Old Rue. Old Rue opened his mouth, but couldn't say a word. Qin Wushuang lifted his body and rushed to the door. He looked inside and saw an even younger man with a lewd expression holding Shui Rulin and putting her on the bed. Qin Wushuang's anger surged as he shouted, "Traitor! How dare you?" He kicked the door open and flashed into the room. His speed was as fast as a ghost. He rushed to Shui Rulin's bed and wrapped the quilt around Shui Rulin's body. When the young man saw Qin Wushuang, his eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. He quickly retreated and glanced outside. He saw that his companion had fallen to the ground. "Old Rue, what happened to you?" Qin Wushuang saw that although Shui Rulin's outer clothes were untied, her underwear was still intact. Obviously, she hadn't been violated. He relaxed a lot. He untied Shui Rulin's body and said to Shui Rulin, Rulin, I'm sorry I'm late. Shui Rulin was very shy. She was surprised and happy, like a frightened little lamb. But in her eyes, there was a kind of strength that made people feel tender affection for her. Shui Rulin's voice was choked with sobs. Big Brother Qin, this group of villains, they killed all the villagers, all of them. Speaking until here, Shui Rulin's tears were already falling like rain. This kind and inexperienced young girl suffered such a heavy punishment on the bed. It was easy to imagine the panic in her heart. When Qin Wushuang heard this, his heart and lungs were about to explode. He gently patted Shui Rulin's shoulder. His eyes suddenly flashed with killing intent. He walked outside in big strides. The young man had already abandoned his companion and ran outside. Qin Wushuang shouted, "Evil thief, you still want to leave?" Qin Wushuang didn't think at all. He raised a graceful spiritual bow. With one arrow, the young man didn't even have time to turn around before his head was blown off by the dark green arrow. Qin Wushuang didn't even look. Just as he was about to kill old Rue with one palm, he suddenly remembered something. His palm sucked and grabbed old Rue. He asked with a serious tone, "You're called old Rue, right?" "Yes, yes." This old Rue looked rough on the outside, but he was extremely afraid of death. When he saw Qin Wushuang earlier, he was already scared out of his wits. At this moment, he was even more scared to death. His whole body was trembling like sifting chaff. "Who are you?" Qin Wushuang didn't want to talk nonsense. He only wanted to know the truth of the matter. Old Rue stammered, We're from the Xian Tan village." "Where is that?" It's a mountain village." But you're saying that you're mountain bandits? How could you mountain bandits take a fancy to this poor village?" Qin Wushuang felt that this old Rue was somewhat vague. "No, it's not like that. We're just passing by, not here to rob the village." Old Rue's face was ashen. "You didn't come to rob the village, but you killed all the villagers. It seems that you're born to kill, right?" Qin Wushuang's tone was unkind. Old Rue's whole body was trembling. "It's not me who wants to kill. It's him who wants to kill." Old Rue pointed at the young man who was shot dead by Qin Wushuang. "He wants to kill. He said that anyone who sees us must die." "Anyone who sees you must die?" Qin Wushuang's voice was cold. "So you're saying that you're not allowed to see the light of day? What you're doing is shameful. I advise you to confess honestly, so that you won't have to suffer." "Young hero, it's really none of my business. I'm the root of his problem." This time, we received orders from above to head to the Orderly Mountain Prefecture. When we passed by, a mountain villager who was collecting firewood saw us, and he started to kill us. I also advised him, but he didn't listen to me. "Head to the Orderly Mountain Prefecture." When Qin Wushuang heard the words Orderly Mountain Prefecture, he was more or less sensitive. After all, he had just left the Pat Mountain Prefecture not long ago. And at this moment, those freelance martial artists were still thinking about capturing Qin Wushuang for rewards. "What are you going to do at the Orderly Mountain Prefecture?" Qin Wushuang asked closely. "I really don't know. We're just following orders. As for what we're going to do, there were no orders from above. They only said that we'll know when we get there." "It seems that you're deliberately deceiving me, right?" "No, I wouldn't dare." That old Rue immediately explained, "I really don't know. I've told you everything I know. I'm just following orders." A trace of doubt flashed across Qin Wushuang's mind. However, he also knew that he would not be able to get anything out of this old Rue. Just as he was about to kill this old Rue, Shui Rulin walked out of the house while trembling. "Big Brother Qin." When Qin Wushuang saw Shui Rulin, he immediately walked over. "Rulin, hurry and enter the house." Shui Rulin shook her head. "No, Big Brother Qin, you're going to kill him, right? For such a scoundrel, if I don't kill him, how could I face those innocent villagers?" Shui Rulin's face turned pale. When she thought of those villagers, her heart palpitated again. Shui Rulin lightly bit her lips and said timidly, "Big Brother Qin, I don't want to see any more dead people. I really don't want to see any more dead people. If I don't kill him, how could those mountain villager rest in peace?" Old Rue immediately pleaded, "Young master, I really didn't kill anyone. I'm just a follower. I didn't kill anyone. Shui Rulin also said, the one who killed was that scoundrel. He didn't kill anyone. Even if you didn't kill anyone, you're still an accomplice. Qin Wushuang angrily rebuked old Rue. He had already taken out the violet sun sword and was walking towards old Rue step by step. At this moment, an auspicious light suddenly flashed in the sky. A fragrance assailed the nostrils and quickly descended from the sky. A multicolored lawn carriage descended. Unexpectedly, several beautiful women walked out of it. These women were all very young. They were arched behind a woman dressed in palace attire. The woman's appearance was graceful. She had phoenix eyes and red lips. She looked very dignified. When she looked around, Qin Wushuang also felt awe-inspiring. If you want to know the future, please go to www.qijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.